Hello everyone, you're watching the channel Stories of Our Life. Friends, make yourselves comfortable. I wish you to truly enjoy listening to this life story.
Well, look at what's happening here. It's morning, and he's already drunk. Such a young man, and he's already ruining himself, exclaimed the elderly woman in the black coat and brown hat with brims, from under which a few gray strands protruded. Lucia turned her head towards the trees, where the passerby was looking, and peered closely. Among them, she didn't immediately make out the young man lying on the ground and involuntarily recoiled, covering her mouth with her hand. In this weather, you can easily catch a cold just walking around, not to mention lying like this on damp ground, the girl thought. At that very moment, as if to confirm her thoughts, a cold, bone-chilling wind blew. Lucia raised her collar higher, while the elderly woman continued her indignant speech. These times we live in. People used to have shame and conscience, but now. Why do you judge strangers so quickly? Maybe he needs help. Lucia said with surprise. Help? Don't make me laugh. He's just drunk, that's all the help he needs. But Lucia was no longer listening to the lady's outraged words, she was walking towards the young man. With each step, her heels sank into the damp earth mixed with fallen leaves, but the girl seemed completely oblivious to it. Her attention was completely focused on the figure of the young man lying nearby. What if he's already dead, flashed through her mind, sending a shiver down her spine. Approaching, Lucia bent down cautiously, examining the man for signs of life. To her relief, she noticed his chest slightly rising and falling. He was breathing. Along with this, she noticed the pleasant features of the young man's face, his neat haircut, and appreciated the subtle scent of expensive perfume emanating from him. Strangely, he vaguely reminded Lucia of her father. It can't be that such a handsome man, so well-groomed, is an alcoholic, and he doesn't smell of alcohol, she pondered. No, he definitely needs an ambulance, as soon as possible. The girl quickly took out her cell phone and dialed the necessary numbers. Yes. There's a man here, he's not feeling well. The address? I don't know. She stood up and started looking around for house numbers. Calle de la Alameda. The house number is? Number 48, the old stranger, who, despite her initial indignation, continued observing the situation, provided the information. Number 48, Lucia repeated into the phone. No, I don't know what's wrong with him. He's lying in the bushes, and I was just passing by. All right, we'll wait for you. Short beeps sounded from the phone, and Lucia, tucking it back into her pocket, said, Young man. Young man, can you hear me? He's probably sleeping, assumed an elderly stranger. What did they say to you on the phone? They said they sent an ambulance. Asked me not to go anywhere and wait for them. Well, you have nothing to do but wait, dear. Besides, you called for an ambulance, and I need to go to the market. I have a lot of things to do. I don't have time to deal with all these drunkards around here. Turning around, she walked briskly in the opposite direction, dragging an empty shopping bag on wheels behind her. Lucia looked at the young man again. I wonder who he is. What happened to him? How long has he been lying here? Has no one else noticed him before her? Or maybe they saw him but just didn't want to help, thoughts swirled in her head. Human indifference to someone else's misfortune always horrified the girl. There was no ambulance in sight, and looking at her watch, Lucia realized she was horribly late. Today, she was supposed to meet her friend. Their plans included going to the cinema, indulging in popcorn, and then finding a cozy cafe to discuss recent events. But now, everything was falling apart. After they graduated from college, the two friends rarely met. Celia got married to a classmate and was soon going to become a mother, while Lucia had less luck in her personal life, dedicating all her free time to work, hoping to pay off her mortgage as soon as possible. It seemed like time had stood still. She grabbed her phone again, this time dialing her friend's number to apologize for the cancelled meeting. Oh my goodness, exclaimed Celia upon learning the details, you're amazing, and don't you worry about me. I would have done the same if I were in your place. I'm glad you're not upset, Celia. Thanks for understanding. You're welcome. But know that I'll definitely be mad if you don't call me back and tell me how everything ended. She laughed over the phone. We'll meet. I'm sure we'll still have plenty of time together. The next 4 months, just the two of us, and then, excuse me, it'll be the three of us. Lucia smiled and, hanging up the phone, let out a relieved sigh. She felt a little better now. Suddenly, she heard a quiet moan, and an instant chill ran down her spine. Can you hear me? She leaned down to the stranger. What happened to you? Where am I? The young man barely said. I don't know how to explain. You're lying on the street. I called for an ambulance. It's on its way, Lucia explained with a trembling voice. He tried to open his eyes, and it was evident that such a simple movement was causing him great difficulty. Finally, he managed to do it, and now he was trying to focus his gaze on his savior. Then he whispered faintly, Lucia. Wait, do we know each other? I don't know you, the girl was surprised. My head hurts a lot, the guy grimaced. Lucia wanted to repeat her question, asking how he knew her, but she heard the wail of an ambulance siren. Peering out from behind the bushes, she saw the vehicle had stopped nearby, right in front of the house she had described to the dispatcher. 2 sturdy men in white coats stepped out of the ambulance, and she waved her hands to signal that their patient was lying there. The one carrying an orange medical bag quickly headed towards the young man, while the other approached Lucia. Is he your acquaintance? The doctor inquired. Tell us what happened. I found him about 20 minutes ago. He was unconscious and only regained consciousness before you arrived. All right, we'll take care of it. Augustin, what's the situation with him? Andres, I don't want to shout across the street. Can you come over here? The paramedic standing next to Lucia furrowed his brow and, preparing to go to his partner, said to her as a parting remark, You can go home. His life is not in danger. We'll take him to the hospital, and he'll receive the necessary care there. By the way, did you find any of his belongings? Maybe some documents? No, Lucia shrugged, looking around. The doctor let out a heavy sigh, putting his hands in his coat pockets, and walked toward the ambulance, where his partner and the patient were waiting. Lucia followed him. So, what's your name? The other paramedic asked the young man. I'm not entirely sure, but I think it's Benjamin. So, you're not certain? The guy only shrugged in response, looking lost. I see. And your last name? Do you remember that or where you live? Well, anything at all? I don't know, the patient shook his head. Benjamin glanced at one doctor and then the other. When he noticed Lucia, he said, Lucia. Didn't you say you don't know each other? The paramedic who had spoken with her earlier was surprised. We are strangers, she said, her eyes widening in indignation. He just knows my name, but I have no idea how. Can I ride with you to the hospital? She suddenly asked. Dr. Augustin chuckled and looked at Benjamin. You don't mind if the only girl you remember rides with us? No, I don't mind, Benjamin whispered, his eyes still fixed on Lucia. Andres, move it. Augustin urged his partner. A couple of minutes later, everyone was seated in the ambulance, and Lucia occasionally glanced at Benjamin, trying to understand how he knew her. One of the medics, named Augustin, fussed around Benjamin, while his partner, Andres, leaned slightly towards Lucia and whispered, Do you really not know him, or are you pretending? I've never seen him before, she whispered back. Interesting, he smiled and curiously looked at Lucia, but if you happen to remember when you crossed paths with him, let us know. He's struggling, he can't even recall his name properly. He says he's Benjamin, but then again, maybe he's not. Andres, why are you bothering the girl? Augustin snorted at him, give it a rest. Just being cautious. I try to be thorough with everyone, he replied and took out some papers, jotting down notes. Lucia looked at Benjamin, who still hadn't uttered a word. When she noticed he was also looking at her, she blushed and turned her gaze to the window. She couldn't help but notice that he was very handsome, brown eyes, straight nose. But I haven't even said thank you to you. She heard his voice and turned back to him. Well, for not leaving me there in the bushes. It wasn't difficult for me, don't worry. Everything will work out, and you'll remember everything, she assured him. Of course, he agreed, leaning back on the seat and closing his eyes. After some time, the ambulance began maneuvering through the hospital buildings. Well, here we go, the circus begins, Andres said, opening the door. And who's on duty today? Augustin looked at him in surprise. Cornelio. Oh, then we're definitely in for something, his partner confirmed. Listen, Augustin, can you go instead? I had an argument with him and I can't go there at all, Andres pleaded. Andres, be more independent and brave. Come on. Otherwise, I'll have to do everything for you, Augustin replied. Thanks for not refusing, partner, Andres said and stepped out of the vehicle. Lucia didn't understand what the doctors were arguing about, but when she entered the emergency department, she was taken aback by how the young specialists were talking to each other. Andres, seemingly trying to prove something, gestured wildly with his hands, while the infamous Cornelio, or as Augustin jokingly called him, the terror of the entire emergency department, was simply unbearable. In the end, Andres couldn't take it anymore, waved his hand, and stormed out of the room, slamming the door loudly. What do you want here? Outsiders have no place here, Cornelio barked at Lucia. I called for the ambulance for Benjamin. I just wanted to offer some help if needed, the girl said, feeling flustered. We have everything we need, we don't need anything. Go home. Antonia. Where did she disappear to again? How much tea can she drink? The man grumbled as he left the small room. Well, there you have it, Lucia shrugged, turning to Benjamin, I should probably go now, and you take care of yourself. She was already heading towards the exit, but unexpectedly, the guy who lay on the stretcher grabbed her hand. Lucia, stay. But you heard what the doctor said. But that's not what I wanted to say, he hesitated for a moment, I mean, don't abandon me completely. It turns out you're the only person I know. Lucia looked at Benjamin with astonished eyes, but he squeezed her hand even tighter. Understand, I not only know your name, but your face. It's so familiar to me. I can't shake the feeling that I know you very well. Well, okay, she whispered softly, I will visit you if the doctor allows, and I'll try to find your relatives, but right now I really need to leave. Thank you. Thank you so much. You're welcome, but you need to let go of my hand, Lucia smiled. I'm sorry. When the gloomy Cornelio returned to the reception area, Lucia asked him, Can I visit the patient? That's not for me to decide. Call the reception in a couple of days, and you'll find out everything, he replied gruffly. She said, goodbye, to Benjamin and stepped out into the fresh air. It took Lucia an hour and a half to reach home, and as soon as she kicked off the hated heels in the hallway, she flopped down into the armchair. Even though the clock showed midnight, Lucia felt as if she had been squeezed like a lemon. Grabbing her phone, she immediately dialed Celia's number. Hey, I'm finally home, Lucia said. Great. I was starting to consider calling rescue teams with dogs and going on a search for you, Celia joked. So, who's that stranger? Did you find out anything? No, he says his name is Benjamin, but he doesn't remember anything else, Lucia replied. Oh, well, not the most thrilling date, I suppose. Celia, what are you talking about? Lucia didn't understand. Well, you said he's a handsome guy. As we say, good guys don't just lie around on the streets. Turns out ours was lying in the bushes. Struggling to contain her laughter, Lucia corrected her friend, first of all, Benjamin isn't ours. And secondly, he's much older than me. Come on, Lucia, don't exaggerate. In 5 years, you'll also be over 30. So age isn't the issue. But seriously, how does he know you? I don't know, Lucia pondered. I'll call the emergency room tomorrow and bring him food. Maybe with time, his memory will return, and we'll find out everything. So, you've decided to visit him then? Yes, Celia. And what about work? Have you found another job? I've sent out my resume to a few places. Now I'm waiting for responses. If nothing comes up, then I'll figure something out. But honestly, Celia, there's nothing in life that I'm waiting for as eagerly as the moment I can quit. I can't take it anymore. Is Dario bothering you again? You know, he never stopped. But now all his attention is focused on me since Amelia quit a month ago. I just don't understand. He's over 50, has a wife, kids, and still can't calm down. I suppose, Lucia, your decision is final then? Yes, unless a decent job opportunity comes up. However, housing might become a problem. I don't see a solution for that yet. The girls chatted a little more on other topics and said their goodbyes. Lucia hung her coat in the closet and headed to her bedroom. She loved her small apartment with all her heart. It may have been tiny, but it was incredibly cozy. The place was located on the outskirts of the city, where Lucia had grown up. A couple of years ago, she graduated from university and now worked as an economist at a local company. The job was challenging and demanding, but the salary was not something to be excited about. Nevertheless, Lucia didn't complain. She enjoyed everything except for her department head. He was the one who made her work life difficult. After her friend Amelia left the company, Lucia felt even more down. She increasingly thought it was time to find a new job. However, quitting meant finding another position, adapting to a new team, and perhaps facing a probationary period. Her mortgage didn't allow her to relax. She couldn't afford to be without a job even for a short period. So, she sent out her resume to organizations in neighboring towns, thinking that if an opportunity came up, she would move without hesitation. Monday morning didn't start well. Lucia wanted to finish her reports as quickly as possible. She could have done so if her manager hadn't been standing over her all morning. Not to supervise her work, but to vividly describe how he spent his weekend. Enjoy the last warm days, Lucia, the man rambled while standing by the window. The weather outside is fantastic. It's tempting to go for a walk. I love this time of year. Yes, Lucia replied, without raising her head from her work. How about we take a walk together after work? Lucia pounded on the keyboard, trying to signal that she was very busy. I can't, Dario. I need to finish this report urgently. Besides, you gave me until tomorrow's lunchtime. Oh, right, that's true, he said, already heading towards the exit, but suddenly he stopped and said, well, I'm not inviting you now. Maybe in the evening, after work. You'll be free then. No, Lucia replied. Why not, if it's not a secret? I'm going to the hospital. I need to bring food to someone. Oh, I can give you a lift as a friend, it's not far. Lucia, don't think anything bad. I just want to be your friend. No need. My boyfriend won't appreciate such friendship. Lucia tried her best to hold back from telling Dario everything she thought about his so-called friendship. But in the office, silence hung in the air. The girl stopped breathing and stared into her boss's eyes without blinking. It was unpleasant for her to constantly come up with excuses when he invited her for another outing. She didn't like making up stories at all. Yet, she had no desire to put up with his obvious advances or be friends with him either. Moreover, all of his friendships with subordinates lasted only until rumors reached his wife. And, unsurprisingly, all of his so-called girlfriends filed resignations at their own will. Therefore, Lucia decided to lie just this once but convincingly, hoping that Dario would get angry at her and find a replacement to spite her. And now, she silently stared at him, waiting for his reaction, secretly hoping for the best. Who's this young man? Dario asked, slowly enunciating each word. I haven't heard of him before. His name is Benjamin. Yes, we've been dating for a few months now. I just haven't told anyone about it, you know, not to jinx it, she said dreamily, rolling her eyes. He's so amazing. That's why I'm worried. When should we expect a wedding invitation? Dario smirked. Oh, definitely not until they discharge him from the hospital. Is he sick? Yes, he was attacked, Lucia sighed sadly, right near my house, can you believe it? But don't worry, he's already recovering. The worst is behind us. I see. Well, I'm happy for you, truly. Oh, by the way, I almost forgot, I have a meeting tomorrow at 9. So, I need the report to be ready by the end of today, not tomorrow's lunch. Hurry up, or else I'll have to find someone faster. He left the office without much thought, and Lucia breathed a sigh of relief. Her hands were trembling. This is the end, the girl thought. She probably had until the end of the month. If she didn't find a new job by then, she would be unemployed. Lucia had no doubt that Dario could seek revenge. For a long time, he had been showing attention to Vera, but when she got tired of it, she expressed her thoughts about his friendship to him. And where is she now? She left last week after being asked to submit a resignation. You're next, Lucia, Amelia laughed, packing her belongings. Hang in there, maybe he'll retire. You're joking. People like Dario work until their last breath. Jokes aside, if I were you, I'd start looking for a new job already, her colleague warned. I got tired of refusing, and you see where it led me. Amelia left, leaving Lucia feeling uneasy. And now she was in her position. Over the next 4 days, they only allowed Benjamin to have visitors through a glass partition because his condition was causing concern for the doctors. But by the end of the week, Lucia had lost all hope. Calling the hospital once again, she heard a tired female voice on the other end. Who are you to him? I'm Lucia. I found him when Benjamin was unconscious. I see, the woman chuckled, well, come on, the reception is open until 8 p.m., but don't be late, or I won't let you in. The line immediately went dead, and Lucia still couldn't believe what she had heard. After work, she rushed to the store and then immediately took the bus. Getting off the transport, she regretted wearing high-heeled boots in the morning. Running in them was extremely uncomfortable, but today nothing could stop her. Bursting into the reception area, she almost collided head-on with the security guard. Watch out, young lady, he exclaimed. Sorry, I'm just afraid of being late. Well, yes, first they're late, then they break the doors, and then I get scolded. He looked at her attentively with a frown and let out a heavy sigh. All right, why are you just standing there like a statue? Go. Thank you. Lucia smiled, quickly putting on the boot covers over her boots, and headed towards the table where a plump woman in a white coat was calmly seated. Good evening, I'm here to see Benjamin. Do you think we have multiple patients with that name? Does your Benjamin have a last name? He does, but he doesn't remember it. He lost his memory. I see, we talked on the phone. Go upstairs to the second floor, room 205. You have half an hour, young lady, don't linger. Lucia nodded and rushed to the stairs. Climbing to the second floor, she easily found the right ward and entered. At the farthest bed by the window, she saw Benjamin. Hello, she greeted quietly to those present. I'm here to see Benjamin. Good evening, an elderly man in the neighboring bed smiled in response. Come in, don't be shy. Benjamin, you have a visitor. The young man opened his eyes, and when he saw Lucia, he smiled widely. I've been waiting for you so much. He tried to sit up in bed, but she stopped him. Lie down, don't get up, she approached and carefully sat on the edge of the bed. The doctors promise that I'll recover soon. They never found my documents, and I'm not even sure if I ever had them, he said. But I'm sure your family is looking for you, Lucia reassured him. By the way, I wanted to thank you for the food. It was so unexpected and nice. Is there anything specific you need, anything I can bring? No, it's better if you come yourself. It's a strange feeling, living without a past, but after talking to the people in this ward, I realized I don't live in this city. How did you figure that out? Lucia was intrigued. Well, for example, you don't have trolleybuses here, and the city seems small. Also, I'm not sure why, but I remember living alone, so the chances of someone looking for me are very slim. Not anyone at all, she exclaimed. Well, all right, you didn't have time to start a family. But what about relatives? The young man closed his eyes and shook his head negatively. Nobody. Is that even possible? Lucia couldn't stop being amazed. It happens. By the way, Benjamin, since you brought it up, did you remember how you know me? This question has been bothering me all these days. No, he replied and then said, the nurse said they would discharge me in a couple of weeks. They can't keep me longer because of the lack of space. So if I don't remember anything by then. You will remember, Lucia said confidently. Don't think about the worst and focus on getting better. Anyway, we'll come up with something. 2 weeks is not that short if you think about it. He smiled, and Lucia, feeling awkward, glanced at her watch. After saying goodbye to Benjamin and his ward neighbors, she stepped into the corridor and leaned against the cold wall. Her thoughts were jumbled, her throat felt dry, and she had no desire to go home. The only thing she wished with all her heart was to help Benjamin remember his life before that Sunday morning. And who are you visiting? A nurse asked. Lucia flinched, and only now did she notice the young nurse in a white-as-snow uniform. The nurse had dark hair tied up in a bun, her lips painted with pink lipstick, and her green eyes were fixedly staring at Lucia. Visiting hours are over, young lady, Helena said. Sorry, Lucia looked at the nurse's badge. Helena. I just came out of the ward. You're here for Diego, I assume. You know he's not allowed any food yet. No, I came to see Benjamin. Helena raised her eyebrows in surprise and softened her expression. Don't worry. Emmanuel, Benjamin's attending physician, is a wizard. It might not happen right away, but his memory will gradually return and he'll be back on his feet. Patience and support are essential. By the way, who are you to Benjamin? I'm his acquaintance. Well, then. We haven't found his documents yet, but everything should be clarified any day now, she said dreamily. You're lucky with your acquaintance. He's so gallant and charming. Thank you very much, Lucia replied, I need to go now. Please, tell Estella, the woman who checks food for patients at the entrance, that I kept you here. She can start a scandal. She's got quite the temper. Lucia smiled and walked away. Descending to the first floor, she immediately caught Maria's disapproving gaze. Maria stood in the middle of the hall, arms folded across her chest. What time is it, my dear? She asked sarcastically, noticing the visitor's confusion. All right, I'll forgive you this once, but next time. Goodbye. Lucia interrupted her and swiftly left. The next morning, Lucia went to work. She wanted to believe that Dario would be busy with something else and wouldn't find time to bother her. But it turned out to be completely different. As soon as Lucia entered and sat down at her desk, turning on the computer, the office door swung open and there stood her boss, Dario. He nodded in greeting, walked in, and sat on an empty chair by the window. He looked stern and showed clear displeasure. I have bad news for you, Lucia. What is it? She managed to force out. Yesterday's report had a serious mistake made by you. That can't be. I double-checked everything several times. Don't argue, Dario said dryly. You know, I hired you for this position without any experience, knowing how challenging it is for a young specialist to find a job. But now you regret it, she finished his sentence for him. Don't overreact, Lucia. I'm just trying to make you understand that your absent-mindedness nearly jeopardized a deal. You need to be more attentive. We managed to fix the mistake, but you see, I wasted a whole hour on it. Thank you, Lucia replied. You're welcome, he smiled. By the way, how is your young man doing? He's doing great. That's why I asked. We have a new order, and I'll urgently need reports from you, so you'll have to stay late today. It won't be a problem if you skip your date with your fiancé, will it? Lucia didn't respond and clicked the mouse. This was becoming too much. Lucia. Benjamin is getting better, so everything is fine, she forced out, avoiding eye contact. A heavy silence hung in the room. Lucia pretended to be fully focused on her work. Dario let out a deep sigh and got up from the chair. All right, Lucia, I won't distract you anymore. But if you have any questions, I'll be in my office. With that, he left the room. Once the door closed behind him, Lucia leaned back in her chair, closed her eyes, and moaned. Not a single response to her resume from employers. Not one. Soon she'd be ready to clean floors in the hallways, just to avoid seeing that repulsive Dario. During her lunch break, Lucia decided to call her mom. Hi, Mom. Lucia, is everything okay? Yes, everything's fine, Mom. How about you? Jasmine started telling her about how she and her friends visited an art gallery, but Lucia hardly listened. She knew she had to tell her mom about her decision, but she had no idea how to do it. Jasmine was a strong-willed woman who didn't entertain objections and was convinced that in life, there were only two opinions, hers and the wrong one. As soon as Lucia finished school and got into a distance learning university, she wasted no time and moved out, renting a room. She knew living on her own would be tough, but it was worth the peace it brought. Now Lucia was independent. She had her own place, even if it was mortgaged. Her income was sufficient for everything. She visited her mom only on rare occasions and only when her mother was in a good mood. However, since Jasmine retired, her daughter's visits became infrequent and short. It was all because Jasmine, despite her daughter's age, loved to take charge and make decisions for her. When we get together next time, you'll definitely come with us, Jasmine said. Mom, I've decided to quit my job and move to another city. What? Mom, I won't discuss this. I've made up my mind. Again, silence hung on the line, and then her mother spoke in an offended tone, so you've decided to leave me here alone. And if something happens to me, if I need your help, if you run out of money, come back to me. 2 empty rooms, plenty of space. No, Mom. I want to live in a big city, not in this backwater place. There are more opportunities there. Mom, come with me, will you? Let's leave everything behind. Besides, there's not much to leave behind anyway. We can start anew. Unlike you, I have things to part with, and I don't want to. Besides, my apartment is dear to me, like a memory. Lucia let out a heavy sigh. She knew her plan was a failure. Her mother would never agree to it. You know, Lucia, I really don't understand what's bothering you. You have a job, in your field, just as you wanted. The salary is quite decent for our town, her mother said. Mom, you don't understand, Lucia replied. Okay, Mom, I should get back to work. I'll come over on the weekend, all right? Call me first. After a series of short beeps, as soon as Lucia placed the phone on the table, it rang again. Celia's photo appeared on the screen, and her friend's smile instantly warmed Lucia's heart. It's easier to reach the president than to reach you, exclaimed Celia. Hey. Yes, I talked to my mom, Lucia replied. Oh, then that's why you sound so sad. I guess she didn't support your idea. No, she doesn't want to move, and if I leave, she said she'd be upset, Lucia sighed. So, how's your little one doing? Oh, he's doing fine. Eating, sleeping, and kicking. I guess when he's born, he'll cry even more. And how's your Benjamin? Have you visited him? At the mention of Benjamin, Lucia's heart skipped a beat. She updated her friend on the latest news, and upon hearing giggling on the other end, she asked, Why are you laughing? Well, I was just thinking, after he gets discharged, will you let him stay with you? Why? Lucia gasped. I don't know, maybe because he's a handsome guy, you live alone, and he has nowhere else to go, and he needs care. You never abandon your loved ones, I know you. But what if he has a wife? Or a fiancé? We can't be certain, Celia said. But he doesn't remember them, he just knows he lived alone. But that's not confirmed. Lucia, can't you see your happiness? Celia teased. I don't see it, but I hear that my friend has turned into a matchmaker. And why not? Celia chuckled. Let's discuss it later. All right. But can I bet with you that I won't abandon him? Otherwise, we wouldn't be friends. I'm just the same, Lucia said, and after chatting a bit about trivial matters, they said their goodbyes. But a few days later, something incredible happened. On a beautiful Saturday morning, after breakfast and finishing their routines, Lucia sat across from Benjamin and laughed at his hospital stories. I can't take it anymore, she said, catching her breath. You must want me to burst from laughter and never come back. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't even know how I survived here. You're like a ray of sunshine, he said, glancing out the window. She looked in the same direction, then shifted her gaze to the clock hanging above the door. Lucia felt anxious because with each passing day, they were getting closer and closer. Benjamin awaited her visits, and she found it easy and comfortable to converse with him, unlike with her boss. However, there was one but, his past remained a mystery to everyone. Don't leave, Benjamin pleaded. Unexpectedly, the hospital room door swung open, and a stunning girl appeared on the threshold. It seemed like she came straight from the cover of a glossy magazine. Perfect figure, long shiny dark hair, exquisite makeup. She made everyone present gaze at her for a few seconds in admiration. Benjamin, she exclaimed, striding quickly towards him, the plastic covers on her shoes rustling. How did you end up here, Benjamin? Why are you looking at me like that? Hello, Benjamin greeted the guest, looking confused. With a hint of haughtiness, the girl glanced at Lucia and blurted out, Don't tell me you don't remember me. I'm Marisol, your fiancé. Fiancé? Benjamin repeated. Are you serious? Marisol gasped. Don't scare me. The doctor tried to explain, but I still don't understand anything. Benjamin suffered a head injury, Lucia managed to say, his memory hasn't fully returned, but some memories are resurfacing. Marisol sat on a chair by the window and, pointing her finger at Lucia rather rudely, asked, And who are you? This is Lucia, Benjamin explained. She's the one who found me on the street and called an ambulance. Great, so you don't remember me at all? Marisol extended. Well, your face looks familiar, Benjamin replied. Benjamin couldn't take his eyes off the girl. But forgive me, I thought we were getting married soon. Wait, how did you find me? And why only after a week, he asked. Well, I actually thought you had gone to visit your relatives, as you planned. You invited me along, but I naturally declined because I prefer to have a proper vacation, not listen to dull stories about someone else's past life day and night. She paused and then sighed. My friend and I were vacationing on the islands, and I flew back home 4 days ago. But when I couldn't reach you, I contacted your family, and they informed me that you weren't there. So, I decided to call all the hospitals, just in case. I figured I would start calling the morgues if I couldn't find you in the hospitals. You had to be somewhere. Benjamin remained silent, looking away. What about your friends and parents, Benjamin? Lucia finally asked. Isn't anyone concerned about where you are? He doesn't have parents, and his friends are SOSO. When are you getting discharged? Your vacation will be over soon, and it's time to get back to work, Marisol replied. I won't be able to work. After the treatment, I'll need rehabilitation, but I can't say how long it will take, Benjamin quietly answered. Marisol widened her eyes in surprise and exclaimed, Then I should be going. Where? Tell me at least something about my life, I don't even know my last name, Benjamin requested. Benjamin Alonso, said Marisol, heading towards the exit. I have an important meeting to attend, can't be late. We'll chat some other time, okay? Tell the doctor everything you know about me, Benjamin asked. All right, deal. Goodbye. For now. Wow, Benjamin, what a fiancé. Diego, the roommate in the ward, chuckled with satisfaction. Lucia clenched her lips and could only steal glances at Benjamin. Well, everything was clear now. She was about to leave, but Benjamin unexpectedly grabbed her hand. His grip was so strong and warm that Lucia forgot how to breathe. "Promise me you'll come to see me again," he pleaded. "But it's wrong, after all, you have a fiancé," Lucia said. "What fiancé? I don't even know her," he sighed. "Please don't disappear." Benjamin looked at Lucia with such hope that she couldn't refuse him. "I'll try to come tomorrow, and if not, then definitely on Monday. What would you like me to bring?" "Nothing," he smiled, still holding her hand. "But I really need to go now, I have to hurry." The next morning, as soon as she woke up, Lucia was getting ready to head back to the hospital. "I knew you'd come today," Estella smiled, putting aside a crossword magazine. "Hello," Lucia greeted. "Has anyone visited Benjamin? Now it's clear why you looked so unhappy. There was a girl who came. She acted like a queen, barely agreeing to put on shoe covers. She was yelling all over the ward. Can you imagine? And do you know who she is?" "Yes," Lucia nodded. "She's Benjamin's fiancé, poor guy. I wouldn't stand being in the same room with her for 5 minutes. And to live in the same apartment with her. But you shouldn't be upset. She won't come again." "Why do you think so?" "Benjamin needs care right now." "Does she care about that?" "I highly doubt it," Estella said. Lucia looked at Estella with surprise, and the nurse waved her hands. "Oh, I've talked too much with you. You should go. It's time for me to work." On the second floor, Lucia noticed a familiar nurse who was intently writing something in her journal. "Hello. Good morning. I wanted to ask about the discharge of Benjamin Alonso." Helena raised her eyes and smiled slightly. "Emmanuel said he would discharge him on Wednesday. Do you know the news?" she asked. "No." "What news?" Lucia inquired. "Benjamin remembered so much yesterday, he was as happy as a child. Go on in, he'll tell you everything himself." "Thank you," Lucia replied. She gently opened the door and peeked into the room. When Benjamin saw her familiar face, he smiled widely. "Hello, come in," he called. "I was told that your memory came back," Lucia said. "Well, not completely. But now at least I know how I ended up here." Lucia placed the bag on the bedside table and sat down beside him. "As we already know, you were planning to visit your relatives," she said. "Yes, but at the last moment, Marisol and I had an argument, and I decided to cancel everything. I told my relatives I wouldn't come and started calling Marisol, but she didn't answer." "And then what happened?" "Well, I decided to wait for her at her office. There, I noticed her getting into a car with tinted windows. I didn't feel like confronting them, so I just aimlessly wandered around the yard. I went to some clearing, and after that, I don't remember anything." "Did you ask Marisol about it?" Lucia cautiously inquired. "No, she insists that she's my fiancé. It seems like I misunderstood what was going on. Or... Listen, the nurse said you'll be discharged on Wednesday." "Yes, will you come?" he asked. Lucia shrugged and smiled gently. "Lucia, I don't know how to thank you," Benjamin said. "What would I have done without such a wonderful guardian angel like you?" "Just get better, that's all I need," she smiled. "I'll do my best. But you're not telling me anything about yourself. How is your job? And how are things in general?" he asked. Lucia let out a heavy sigh, recalling the tense relationship with her immediate supervisor, Dario. He still didn't give up hope that their interactions would someday extend beyond professional boundaries. The significant age difference between them and the engagement ring he wore didn't bother him at all. But Lucia didn't want to discuss this with Benjamin. "I'm actually looking for a new job," she replied. "So, you've decided to quit?" Benjamin seemed surprised. Do you have better options? For now, nothing concrete, Lucia replied. Oh, if I could help you with something. No, it's not necessary, Lucia smiled, adjusting her hair slightly. I'll manage. Benjamin gazed at her with obvious interest. What? Lucia asked, taken aback. I'm just admiring. You're very beautiful. Thank you. Well, I'll go now, you all need rest. Benjamin smiled with one side of his mouth, but his eyes still held worry. As Lucia left the hospital, she felt a sense of unease. She knew the discharge date was approaching, and they would soon bid farewell to each other forever. But she didn't know how to handle it. Nor did she want to. Thoughts of Marisol, the unknown man with whom Benjamin's fiancé had left that evening, and the head injury were all troubling her. Lucia was tempted to invite him to stay with her, but he was engaged to Marisol. Walking through the rustling leaves, squinting in the bright autumn sun, she took out her mobile and decided to call her friend, Celia. Celia was delighted to hear her voice and immediately started asking for the latest updates. You've gotten yourself into some murky situation, my friend, Celia said upon learning the details. I feel the same way, Lucia replied. I don't like this Marisol. By the way, did you find out what Benjamin does for a living? No, he didn't tell me. Perhaps he's the son of some oligarch? Celia, you need to watch fewer TV dramas, Lucia chuckled. But if that were the case, I wonder why they didn't get married in the hospital. Benjamin is in a delicate situation now, and he could have agreed to any of her conditions. Your Benjamin didn't even remember her, but he recognized you, Celia remarked. Celia, don't start, Lucia warned. Lucia, don't start procrastinating, Celia exclaimed. You won't find another man like him on the road twice. Once you've recovered, and... I'll hang up now, Celia. Okay, I'll be quiet. So, he's getting discharged on Wednesday, right? And what's next? Will you at least leave him your phone number? Celia inquired. I will. But tell me, how are you doing? Lucia deflected the conversation. What about me? I'm just waiting to go on maternity leave. Oh, I really don't want to go to work. I can barely get up in the morning, even with 5 alarms. By the way, our company has a vacancy for a secretary referent. The salary isn't high, but at least there are no delays. No, Celia, I don't want to work as a secretary, Lucia made a face. I had hoped that you'd stay in the city. Did you change your mind about leaving everything behind? Celia probed. No, but even if I have to leave, we'll still see each other. After all, my mom will stay here. Well, that's true, Celia muttered. She went on to tell Lucia about feeding the baby, and after chatting with her friend for almost an hour, Lucia turned off her phone and put it in her pocket. Talking to Celia was so easy, probably like no one else. Sometimes Lucia thought that if her mother had the same personality, things might have turned out very differently. Lucia rushed from work to make it in time for Benjamin's discharge. She was sure she would encounter Marisol, but Benjamin's fiancé never showed up. At first, she didn't pick up the phone, and when she finally did, Benjamin listened to the chattering on the other end for a long time, becoming increasingly gloomy. She's not coming, he said, disconnecting the call. How can that be? Lucia didn't understand. Well, she said she's very busy and not ready for such changes in her life. The keys to my apartment are in the mailbox, and she's already taken her things. Shall we go to my place? Lucia suggested. What? Benjamin was puzzled. The nurse said you need care, and it's better to go to doctors together. I'm not forcing you, I'm just asking if you're okay with it. I don't understand why you're taking all these troubles, Lucia, Benjamin asked, amazed. I just want to help. I live on the first floor, there's enough space for everyone, we can call a taxi, and... Lucia paused and modestly lowered her gaze, waiting for his response. You've thought this through? Yes. Benjamin looked at Lucia in surprise, finding it hard to believe what was happening. I don't want to inconvenience you, and it's not very manly of me. I didn't expect this, but thank you, he said. Benjamin, you misunderstood. I'm not asking you to marry me, Lucia chuckled. You can stay with me until you recover, and then go back home. But there's one condition. And what's that? Don't scatter your socks all over the rooms. Benjamin glanced at his roommates, and they all burst into laughter together.
Ah,
That's absolutely right, clarified Diego, catching his breath. Take my wife, for example. She goes ballistic if the socks aren't in the laundry. The moment she spots them anywhere else, she starts yelling. I think it's in their blood. Well done, Lucia, you should have talked about this from the start. If I had known all of this, maybe I wouldn't have gotten married at all. Then again, I wouldn't have had anyone bringing me home-cooked meals. All right, so we're going, Lucia reminded them with a smile, barely able to contain her laughter. I'll call a taxi, and we'll go, Benjamin said. Lucia hurried out into the corridor and leaned against the cold wall. Despite the cool autumn air seeping through the slightly open window, she felt flushed with warmth. After dealing with all the formalities, she called for a taxi. Then, they bid farewell to their roommates and rushed down to the ground floor. Estella, the lively and overly curious nurse who diligently checked the patient's belongings and sent disgruntled relatives home with sausages and bread, suddenly perked up. She looked at Lucia and said, Benjamin, I'm glad you're feeling better. Thank you, he smiled, holding Lucia's hand. Lucia, you better escort him home, just in case, Estella said. Of course.
goodbye.
Estella. Take care, the woman replied, beaming. Benjamin squeezed his rescuer's hand even tighter, sending shivers down Lucia's spine. He was too close. Sorry, but this will definitely be convenient, he said. Benjamin, she sighed, it's all right. I know you're one of those men who aren't used to relying on the weaker sex, but it's not forever. And if you don't stop apologizing, I'll personally call a second taxi just for you. I really like your character, he smirked, descending the stairs. I'm glad. An hour later, they were already at Benjamin's home. Lucia was worried that he would see her tiny one-bedroom apartment, change his mind, and leave. But to her surprise, Benjamin seemed pleased. I spent my childhood in an apartment with exactly the same layout. Goodness, that was so long ago, he peered into the hallway and smiled. And in the pantry, I used to hide from my mom. She could never find me for a long time. She played along. Your parents. Lucia began, then fell silent. They're not around anymore, Benjamin calmly replied. It seemed that Benjamin was trying not to show the bitterness of his loss and acted as if nothing had happened, but his eyes betrayed him. My mother died when I was 7, and I don't remember my father, he passed away a month before I was born. So, my grandparents on my mother's side raised me, and if it weren't for them. I really like you, he said. I'm glad you like me, Lucia replied. I just need to go home and get the keys from the mailbox, he said softly, leaning back in his chair. Perhaps Marisol will come back? Lucia suggested. No, Benjamin objected. Even if she changes her mind, it's not my problem anymore. She made her choice. I can't say I expected any decisive actions from her, but think about it. What do I need from someone who abandons me at the first difficult situation? It's easy to be together when there are no problems, but life is full of ups and downs. Well, that's true. And what about the guy who was giving her a ride? I don't remember him. He looks familiar, but I can't figure out where I've seen him before. But I'm pretty sure we've met somewhere, he mused. Just like with you, we've seen each other before. I just can't recall where. Benjamin, hate to disappoint you, but if we had met before, I would remember, she smiled. Are you absolutely sure? I'll go put the kettle on, she grinned, leaving his question unanswered. And I suggest you lie down and rest. Remember what the doctor said, your memory will come back, it just takes time. From the day Benjamin moved in with Lucia, 3 weeks had passed, and with each passing day, his condition improved. Marisol hadn't shown up again, so they could relax. However, Lucia often found herself thinking only about him whenever she was away from home. She would hurry back without minding the way, and she couldn't help but worry about the prospect of being alone in a couple of months, which didn't thrill her at all. What if Marisol came back and they got back together? But for now, Lucia was the only person who cared about Benjamin's well-being. They visited the doctor together and followed all his recommendations. Lucia went to the city to collect the keys, carelessly left by Marisol in the mailbox of a simple 9-story building. Upon entering Benjamin's apartment, Lucia sighed with relief. The place was simple but tastefully decorated. Opening the wardrobe to get his things, Lucia froze in place, seeing a vast collection of stunningly beautiful suits, various shirts, and ties. Curious, she murmured, "Who are you? And where could we have met, Benjamin?" She had tried to start the conversation about his job several times, but Benjamin changed the subject each time. Lucia heard someone calling him on his phone, but she had no idea about the kind of work he did before that dreadful evening. After gathering her bag, she locked the iron door with all its locks and was about to enter the elevator when suddenly her mobile phone rang, and her mother's photo appeared on the screen. "Hello," Lucia quickly answered. "Where are you?" "At home." "I'll be visiting you soon," her mother said. "Why?" "I mean, well, let's do it another day." "I'm busy," Lucia replied. "Lucia, what's going on?" "I've been trying to visit you for 2 weeks now, and all I hear are excuses." "Mum, don't exaggerate. It's just a coincidence. I have a lot of work, and there are things I need to take care of. How about I come to your place in a couple of hours?" "What's the matter?" Jasmine asked sternly. "I have a guest," Lucia admitted. "Is it a man?" Jasmine gasped. "You got involved with someone and didn't tell me?" "I'll be there in an hour." Then there were short beeps on the line. Lucia breathed a sigh of relief and entered the elevator. Of course, meeting her mother didn't bode well. In that regard, they were completely different. Jasmine would never allow anyone into her home under any pretext, not even out of pity. Lucia had never been in such a hurry before. Absurd images flashed in her mind, Jasmine opening the door with her own key, causing a scene or even kicking Benjamin out, ignoring his condition. For so many years, Lucia had tried to free herself from her mother's influence, tried to make her understand that she was no longer a little girl, pleaded for her not to meddle in her life, but it was all in vain. Every time Jasmine heard her daughter's pleas, she would purse her lips and give her signature line, "Don't listen to your mother, then don't cry about it." Then she would disappear for a while, and then the cycle would start all over again. Jumping over the mud and puddles, Lucia rushed into the courtyard and saw her mother. Wearing a plum-colored beret and a black jacket, she stood not far from the entrance, engrossed in her phone. "Mom," Lucia began. Jasmine looked at her daughter and shook her head. "Can you explain who that guy in your house is?" "Am I supposed to report to you?" Lucia retorted. "Let's not argue, Mum. But please allow me to decide who I invite into my home and who I don't." "All right." "Who is he?" Jasmine asked dryly. "His name is Benjamin. He lost his memory after an accident and is temporarily staying with me." Jasmine was puzzled and took some time to gather her thoughts before responding. When she finally did, Lucia immediately regretted telling her mother everything. "You're just like your father. Always bringing home sick animals, kittens, pigeons. I constantly told him that it wouldn't lead to anything good. And he would just brush it off, saying, 'What's wrong with a girl helping everyone? And what do we have to show for it? You turned our apartment into a shelter. But where did you even find him?' Jasmine scolded. "I found him in the bushes," Lucia admitted, barely containing her laughter. "Lucia." "Mum, really?" she laughed, and Benjamin isn't a sick animal, he's a person who also needs help. He has no one else here. Is it so difficult to show a little compassion? Jasmine waved her hand dismissively. Let's go, I'll see your homeless man. And if he's all swollen, I'll kick him out. Good day, Benjamin smiled, noticing a woman incredibly similar to Lucia. My name is Benjamin, he introduced himself. My name is Jasmine. You must be Lucia's mother, if I understood correctly, Benjamin said. Yes. Well, now I understand why your daughter is so beautiful, he complimented. Taking off her jacket and handing it to Lucia, Jasmine sat down on a chair. How did you and Lucia meet? While Lucia was putting away the outerwear in the wardrobe, Benjamin told Jasmine about the recent accident, sharing everything except the part about Marisol. Interesting, Jasmine commented, Lucia doesn't go to clubs, she comes home right after work. Where could you have seen her? Or is there something I don't know? She glanced sideways at her daughter. And how long do you plan to stay here? Until he fully recovers, Lucia quickly replied. When I was young, living with a stranger was considered indecent, Jasmine suddenly said. Times have changed, Mum. By the way, the kettle is boiled, can you help me? Lucia grabbed her friend and pulled her to the kitchen without waiting for objections. It's already hard enough for Benjamin, he hardly remembers anything. And now you decide to scold him. There's nothing between us, if that's what worries you. He's my friend, nothing more. I'm concerned about your life, and if you get pregnant and he runs away, then what? Then you'll immediately remember your mother, won't you? You know, my dear, I recently retired, and I'm finally free. I realized what it means to live for myself. And I don't want to ruin it with grandchildren. And think about yourself, Jasmine paused and looked straight at her daughter. They were so alike, those same green eyes, dark hair with chocolate hues, but their perspectives on life were completely different. Mum, do you really think that? Lucia stammered, not believing what she had heard. I'm just warning you about the mistakes you won't be able to fix later, Jasmine said. Am I also a mistake in your life? Don't talk nonsense, Lucia. You know how much I love you. Mum, you avoided answering. Well, you're right, I never wanted children, I was too young. I found out about the pregnancy too late, when it was already too late to do anything. But at that time, your father and I were married, and he really wanted children. And then. She fell silent. Benjamin isn't right for you, and besides, he has health problems. Stop it, Mum. You've said enough, Lucia struggled to speak, not believing what she was hearing. Decide for yourself what to do. But if you need help, don't come to me. I'm going home, I don't like this introduction of yours. Jasmine got up and left without waiting for a response. It's because of me that you had an argument, right? Benjamin sighed, I'm sorry, I really didn't mean for this to happen. Lucia flinched, not even noticing when he entered the kitchen. His expression looked as if he genuinely felt guilty for what happened. You have nothing to do with this. My mom and I have never gotten along. And after my dad passed away, it became even harder to communicate with her, Lucia explained. What happened to him? He died 10 years ago. He was a long-haul truck driver. After returning from one trip, he would immediately leave for another. I asked him so many times to find a different job, but he always said he was willing to do anything to make sure my mom and I never lacked anything, she said bitterly. I remember that day in the tiniest details. It rained all night, and in the morning, it suddenly froze. The roads turned into an ice rink. The day before, we spoke to him on the phone, and in the morning, I found out my dad was gone. Lucia wiped away tears and looked away, trying to compose herself. I understand, it must have been hard to go through something like that, Benjamin comforted her. Let's change the subject, okay? Sure, Lucia agreed. As for your mom, don't worry, everything will work out. Your mom is the dearest person, no matter what she's like. You know, if I found out my daughter had taken in some stranger, what would I do? What? I would kick him out and wouldn't even bother talking to him, Benjamin chuckled. Are you serious? Well, of course, then we'd come up with something to help him. We wouldn't just leave the person on the street. But with my daughter, I wouldn't let him stay. Wow, you'd be a strict father, Lucia smiled, wiping away her tears. Yeah, I guess I would, Benjamin agreed. So, you think I should send you back home after all? Well, if you think it's best, he replied. What about you? What do you want me to do? Lucia asked. I'm really comfortable here, Benjamin grinned and picked up a cup from the countertop, green tea with lemon, I love it. Lucia couldn't help but smile, feeling a sense of relief. Despite the difficult conversation with her mother, Benjamin's presence brought some comfort and ease to the situation. They continued to talk, laugh, and share stories, finding solace in each other's company. Although the road ahead was uncertain, for the moment, they both felt a sense of belonging and support. The next day promised to be the most ordinary. However, as soon as Lucia arrived at work, everything seemed to take an unexpected turn. It all started when Sylvia, a lady of advanced age and one of the best designers in the company, called out to her in the corridor. Sylvia always looked impeccable, which made her peers envious. Lucia, she exclaimed, looking at her colleague with some regret, please come see Dario urgently. Good morning, has something happened? Lucia asked. I'm not sure, but Dario told me to hurry and get you. Although. Sylvia paused for a moment, do you know anything about staff reductions? The thought of being forced to take early retirement and stay home all the time drives me crazy. However, after talking to Dario, I feel better now, you know who will be doing my work. But what about you? Do you think I might be affected by the layoffs? Well, I don't think you should worry beforehand, just go and see him as quickly as possible. His mood isn't the best today, she waved her hand and went about her business. Dario greeted Lucia with a reserved nod, then gestured toward a chair. For a moment, he seemed to contemplate something before speaking. We have to say goodbye to you, Lucia. Why? She asked. I'm not happy with your performance. But you used to think otherwise, she reminded him. Where did you get that idea? He smirked. You're always making mistakes, not listening to what you're told. Missing deadlines. I don't need an employee like that. Besides, there's already someone to replace you. Fine, then fire me. No, resign on your own terms, and if you resist, I'll take away all your bonuses. Lucia silently gazed away, knowing better than anyone that the reason for her dismissal was far from what they claimed. Of course, she could have chosen to stay, but was it worth it? Considering the environment she would have to work in. I agree, Dario smirked. And yet, things could have turned out differently. Lucia, you understand me, don't you? Please, pass me a sheet of paper and a pen. I'll write my resignation right now. Are you serious? He couldn't believe her. He opened the drawer of the desk, threw a couple of white sheets onto the table, and with a lump in her throat, Lucia quickly began putting words down on the pristine paper, trying to be done with it as soon as possible. When she finished, she dated and signed at the bottom of the page, pushed the letter away, and then stood up. You don't need to work out the 2 weeks, Dario said without looking at her. You'll receive your settlement from the accounting department within an hour. Thank you. Lucia slipped out the door, not seeing anything in front of her as tears clouded her vision. Once inside her own office, she finally let her emotions flow. And when she calmed down a little, she picked up her phone and read the message from Celia, call me back when you can. I have news. Her fingers dialed the familiar number automatically, and when the ringing stopped, she heard her friend's joyful voice on the other end. Lucia, we found you a job. What kind of job? Wait. And what's wrong with your voice? Celia grew cautious. I got fired. Well, actually, they just presented me with a fait accompli. So, what were you saying? Well, good thing I caught you in time. Anyway, my husband found out through his colleagues that a respectable company is looking for an economist. The company is well known, and they offer decent salaries to their employees. The best part is, it's located in the city where your Benjamin lives. So, go for the interview. I just sent you the details. Check your messages. Thank you, Celia. No need to thank me yet. Alright, drop me a line once you arrange everything. Take care for now. Lucia glanced at her phone and chuckled through tears. Life goes on, and everything will be alright, she thought. She dialed the number provided in the message and waited. Soon, a pleasant female voice answered. The girl introduced herself as Rosa and explained that they were indeed looking for an economist. However, the person in charge of candidate selection was absent today. Come by tomorrow at 9 a.m. The boss will be there, and he'll talk to you. We'll see what happens after that, Rosa said. Lucia hung up the phone and smiled. It seems, she said aloud, they say right, everything that happens, happens for the best. She gathered her belongings in a bag, took one last look at her workstation, and went to the accounting department. At home, after lunch, she was in a great mood. But as soon as she opened the door, she sensed something was amiss. A white coat hung on the hanger in the hallway, and next to the wall stood women's boots with very high heels. Lucia froze and listened. Benjamin was talking to someone. It took her just a couple of seconds to recognize the voice. Her fingers involuntarily loosened their grip, and the heavy bag made a loud noise as it fell to the floor. How many times do I have to repeat the same thing? She heard Benjamin's voice, and after a few seconds, he came into the hallway. Oh, hi. Listen, there's something. Why is she in my apartment? Lucia asked softly. I'm on it. Marisol kept ringing the doorbell insistently, then started shouting in the corridor, disturbing the neighbors. I just didn't want you to have any trouble, he explained. Because decent people don't keep their fiancé waiting outside the door, the guest snickered. Actually, I came for Benjamin. It's time for him to come home. I understand that I should have done this earlier, but my work demanded my presence. You know how it is. She reached for her purse and added, by the way, Lucia, thank you for leaving. I'll reimburse you for all the expenses. Just a moment. Fiancé? Lucia mumbled. So it means. Ex-fiancé, Benjamin corrected her and glared at Marisol with irritation. Please leave, don't embarrass yourself. I love you, Benjamin. And what are you doing? She sobbed. What love are you talking about? He smirked. Maybe you can then tell me who you came here with in the black car? On the very day when I lost my memory. Marisol looked scaredly at Lucia. I don't understand you, she said. I was waiting for you near the office, and I saw everything. There was no point in denying it. So, I followed you. Who is that man? Benjamin asked. He's my classmate. We had a meeting, well, all of us classmates. He offered to give me a ride out of courtesy, Marisol explained. Benjamin let out a heavy sigh, rubbing his temples with his hand. Do you take me for a complete idiot? He whispered. Your classmate has a beard, and for years, he's been dreaming of taking my position at work, he said wearily. The room fell silent. Lucia sat down on a chair in the corner, watching Marisol, whose facial expression had suddenly changed. Fear appeared in her eyes. I couldn't remember where I knew him from for a long time, but my memory is coming back, Benjamin continued. Now I remember that a few days before those events, you told me that we were too different and threw your ring at me. You said you wouldn't go to my relatives, and that we needed a break from each other. Isn't that right? Did you have your break? What happened that made you think of marrying me again? And what about the bearded guy? He's just a friend, nothing more, Marisol said, realizing that there was no point in making excuses. Benjamin wouldn't believe her anyway. What was that all about? Lucia asked when the uninvited guest finally left and the door closed behind her. You didn't tell me that you remembered everything. I remembered, but not entirely, Benjamin said. That evening, Marisol got into the car with my colleague. He's been dreaming of becoming my deputy instead of me for years. Wait, so you're the deputy director? Lucia exclaimed in surprise. Yes, but the position isn't as glamorous as it seems to everyone. Marisol is only interested in money in life. If she switched to him, there must be a very weighty reason for it. If I hadn't lost my memory, they would have probably framed me and removed me from the position by now. Lucia silently looked at Benjamin, lost in her own thoughts. Then, she cautiously asked, why did she come now? I mean, why did Marisol show up for you? That's an interesting question, he sighed, leaning back on the couch. But I don't have an answer to it. Not yet. My head is pounding. And you forgot to take your pills again?
Yeah.
Shaking her head, Lucia went to the kitchen and returned with his medication and a glass of water. Take these and lie down to rest. I'm fine, Lucia. I can see that. You look pale and hold your head. Benjamin, this isn't right. Don't think about Marisol or work, just lie down and rest. I'll prepare something for dinner. By the way, why are you home so early? Benjamin suddenly remembered to ask. I quit my job. But I'll tell you more about it later. 2 hours later, they sat at the table. The air was filled with the wonderful aroma of roasted meat. Lucia calmly recounted the events of the morning and smiled. Despite everything that happened, you seem happy, Benjamin observed. So, your story doesn't end with the dismissal. When I wrote that resignation letter voluntarily, I felt so relieved. I've been planning to do it for a while, but there was always something holding me back. Fear of an uncertain future always stopped me. Tomorrow morning, I'm going for an interview. Great. Where? Well, if it's not a secret. It's at a company that, by the way, is located just a 10-minute walk from your place. What? But what about this apartment and your mom? I don't understand. Smiling, Lucia finally shared her plans with him. Yes, honestly, I didn't think you'd be this brave. Are you laughing at me? She blushed. No, I'm serious. Going against the will of someone like Jasmine, not everyone can do that. So, tell me about this company you're talking about. Lucia opened the message on her phone again and read the address aloud. As she looked at Benjamin, she noticed a change in his expression. I've sent my resume to them before. They even promised to call me back once, but as it often happens, they never found the time, Lucia explained. Oh my goodness, how could I forget about that? Unbelievable. Benjamin exclaimed, bursting into laughter. What's so funny? Lucia mumbled when Benjamin calmed down. He took her hands and looked at her as if seeing her for the first time, making her feel uncomfortable. I saw your resume, or rather your photo, before. That's why I thought we knew each other. If I hadn't been hit on the head, I would have come to work the next day and invited you for an interview. But without me, everything came to a halt. Federico is probably occupied with completely different things. Not surprising, Benjamin explained. Federico? Lucia asked for clarification. She did her best to hide her excitement. He will be the one to talk to me tomorrow. On one hand, Lucia wanted Benjamin to fully recover and return to his normal life. On the other hand, she didn't want him to go back home right away. Yet, she sincerely tried to be happy for him, even though she knew her life would soon return to its previous routine. I won't go to the interview then, she suddenly said. Marisol will be there, after all. You should go. You should do it for me, Benjamin insisted. Why? Because while I'm at home, I'm safe. But once I return to work. Benjamin trailed off. I need someone who can gather information about the situation. If you're willing to help, of course. Wait, are you saying that the attack was planned? Lucia gasped. Yes, I'm sure of it. And I know the mastermind behind it. I just need to find out a few more details, and then it's time to give everyone what they deserve. Marisol? You're talking about her, right? Can I abstain from answering? Benjamin smiled, taking Lucia's hand. So, are you willing to help me? Of course, but please explain how. Benjamin smiled and explained to Lucia what she would need to do. She listened attentively, but inside, she couldn't stop the flutter of emotions. It wasn't just fear of the upcoming trip, she had fallen head over heels in love, like a 15-year-old girl, and couldn't help herself. He was right there, needing her, and holding her hand tightly in his. However, Benjamin either didn't notice it or simply chose not to acknowledge it. The next morning was overcast, with dark clouds looming over the city, as if ready to unleash heavy rain at any moment. As Lucia stepped off the bus, she shivered. The bus station was crowded with people rushing from one side to another, dragging heavy suitcases or carrying travel bags. The big city was noisy, busy, and unwelcoming, a stark contrast to the place where Lucia had spent her entire conscious life. For a moment, she stood still, feeling lost and bewildered. The place where she had been invited for the interview was just a 30-minute bus ride away from the bus station, but due to traffic, it took almost an hour to get there. Following all of Benjamin's instructions, Lucia entered a beautiful 3-story building and waited in a small room for Federico, who was supposed to arrive at the office any minute. Good morning, the man greeted her as he took a seat. Lucia, I carefully reviewed your resume, and you're a good fit for us. He stared at Lucia intensely, directly into her eyes. She felt uneasy under the gaze of those incredibly dark eyes, where even the pupils couldn't be distinguished. From the very first glance, she didn't like this man, who had a stern and arrogant expression on his face. He asked many questions, and Lucia answered them with ease. In the end, he informed her, please proceed to the HR department, and we expect you to start work in a week. All right, Lucia replied. Rosa mentioned that the person who was supposed to conduct the interview is on sick leave. Lucia suddenly spoke up. I'm glad you've recovered. She must have been referring to someone else. Our deputy is currently in an unfit state, Federico replied. Oh, I'm sorry, I must have misunderstood. I hope he'll be back soon. I'm not so sure about that, Federico said with a hint of uncertainty. Federico smiled and hurried Lucia to the HR department, just as Benjamin had predicted. As Lucia entered the spacious HR office, she was greeted by 2 employees, one of them being Veronica, a young and lively girl, and the other being Teresa, an older woman who seemed to be in her 50s. They exchanged jokes and playful banter, behaving in a very relaxed manner. Who did you have the pleasure of talking to, dear? Teresa chuckled. Was it the great Federico himself? Well, yes, Lucia replied with a smile.
Ah.
So Federico has become the boss recently? Lucia inquired politely. Yes, indeed, Teresa snickered while stamping some papers. He had been dreaming of sitting in Benjamin's chair. But that won't happen, our main man, Benjamin, respects him too much. Until Benjamin returns, these villains will keep playing by their own rules. Better keep quiet, Veronica whispered, giving Lucia a sideways glance. Oh, but I'm not afraid of anyone here. I have only a few days left until retirement. And as for Benjamin, it's such a shame. He got involved with Marisol, and what did he get? She's already planning to marry someone else. With that, Teresa sighed and handed Lucia back her passport. Thank you so much, Lucia said gratefully and rushed out the door. She was in a hurry, not heading home as Teresa and Veronica might have thought. Following Benjamin's instructions, Lucia had to visit one of the offices and talk to a person Benjamin trusted more than himself. When she emerged from the office half an hour later, she saw Marisol in the parking lot. The ex-fiancé of Benjamin was fussing around a luxurious car, probably twice as expensive as Lucia's apartment. Federico stood beside her, holding her by the waist and telling her something. Lucia managed to slip by unnoticed and hid behind some bushes for a while, observing Marisol. When Marisol disappeared inside the building, still with her companion, Lucia finally headed home. In principle, I suspected as much, Benjamin said when Lucia recounted what she had seen. What do we do now? When I start working and run into Marisol, they will figure us out immediately. Besides, the housing issue is still unresolved, we need to find an apartment. Just don't go, Benjamin replied. But they already hired me, Lucia reminded him. Why did I go through the interview and HR process then? Is there really no job in the end? Why not? Benjamin was surprised. You'll take up that position, just a little later, once I resolve the issue with the person responsible for my memory loss. 3 days went by, and Lucia couldn't find peace. During this time, Benjamin kept making phone calls and solving some issues, but he wouldn't share anything with her. She couldn't understand what he was planning, and it made her anxious. In the evening, Lucia called Celia to have someone to talk to and maybe receive some wise advice. But upon hearing the details, her friend was also puzzled. Are you serious? Celia exclaimed. Just think about it, Lucia. If everything that happened with him was carefully planned, he is now living in your apartment. Oh, please, Lucia sighed. I understand everything myself, and I know the consequences too. Run away from there. Maybe you can stay at my place? Besides, I'm on vacation, and my husband is always working late. Soon I'll get so bored that I'll start doing renovations or assembling the baby crib. By the time I wait for my man, the child will already be going to school. Celia, you're due in January, and it's only October now, Lucia laughed. But thank you for the offer and your concern. I have to decline, though. I can't just leave him alone, you know? Lucia, it's love. No. Well, of course, no, Celia agreed sarcastically. All right, maybe you're right, Lucia conceded. But it's sad that Benjamin doesn't feel anything for me, except gratitude. Let's hope that everything will be fine with him. Federico shivers at the thought of that. You know, he's such a creepy guy. Anyway, I won't bother you anymore. Tell me how you're doing. We really need to meet while I still have some free time. Take care, my friend, Celia sighed and proceeded to share her own news. Early in the morning, when it was still quite dark outside, Benjamin's phone rang. He immediately grabbed the receiver, listened to the caller, and then exclaimed. Gotcha. What? Yawned Lucia, wrapping herself tighter in the blanket. Who got caught? Federico, my beloved colleague and former friend. I don't understand anything. Everything will be explained later, smiled Benjamin, heading to the bathroom. I need to go to work, everything will be resolved today. And you're going alone, it's so far and... Benjamin stared at Lucia, struggling to hold back a smile. You're so concerned about me? Yes, I'm really lucky, he said, then added, get ready quickly, we have a challenging day ahead. Can you tell me what you have planned? For starters, I want to show some papers to the director. Let me make breakfast. An omelette with cheese and pieces of sausage. Just the way you like it. Hurry to the bathroom, time waits for no one. After bidding farewell to her savior in the kitchen, Benjamin took charge of the household chores. An hour later, having had a hearty breakfast, they got into a taxi and set off to their destination. Benjamin behaved confidently, and thanks to this, Lucia began to calm down little by little. Everyone they met at the company, where they arrived, greeted Benjamin and rejoiced at his recovery. Lucia could see that their words and smiles were genuine. People truly respected him. The director of the company, Gonzalo, a dark-haired man with a touch of gray and piercing gray eyes that seemed to see through people, was very pleased to see his deputy. He invited them to sit down and then looked closely at Lucia. What a beautiful companion you have. Is this the same Lucia who saved you? Yes, replied Benjamin. Disturbed, Lucia quickly introduced herself, and Benjamin handed his boss a folder with documents. They had received it just a few minutes ago from Benjamin's assistant, so Lucia could only guess what the documents contained. Gonzalo, take a look at this, said the director, pulling out the sheets from the folder and delving into reading. After a few minutes, his facial expression changed, and he muttered through his teeth. So, he decided to make some extra money. Do I pay him so little? Who else is involved there? Accountant Raquel and my ex-fiancée Marisol. People I once fully trusted, replied Benjamin. This is simply incomprehensible, exclaimed Gonzalo, throwing the papers on the table and reaching for the phone. What happened next? Lucia watched as if in slow motion. Federico tried to justify himself as best as he could to his boss and cursed Benjamin. Marisol, in tears, claimed that she knew nothing. And Benjamin, somehow miraculously, remained composed. Lucia only snapped back to reality when the door to the director's office closed behind her. The shouts became muffled, and the ringing in her ears subsided. What are these papers about? Lucia asked, sinking into the leather sofa. It's not easy to explain right away, Benjamin said, sitting down next to her and furrowing his brow. Federico has always dreamed of becoming the deputy director, Gonzalo's right hand. And the only person standing in his way was me. The position of deputy director was prestigious and quite responsible. However, Federico desired it not out of a love for his work but because he adored money, much more than anything else in his life. He might have achieved his goal and secured the position after a couple of years if it weren't for love. Beautiful, confident, and unattainable Marisol captured his heart. She was like a living dream, and Federico fell in love. For half a year, they hid their relationship from everyone. He pleaded with her to leave Benjamin, promising that they would be happy together, but Marisol only rolled her eyes. Benjamin is the deputy director, he earns well, and he can provide me with a comfortable life. But who are you, Federico? Who, she sarcastically asked, rejecting his latest proposal. After enduring this for a few weeks, Federico found a way out. He just had to get Benjamin out of the way. And then he could live as he pleased. The plan was quite simple. He hired someone to get rid of Benjamin. I'm not sure what Federico wanted, to scare me or get rid of me altogether, but he didn't account for one detail. You. While I was away, Federico got a taste for it and decided to steal a significant sum from our company. How did he manage that? Lucia couldn't comprehend. We were just about to purchase new equipment, and he took advantage of my absence and our director's preoccupation. Federico placed an order for the machines through a long-time acquaintance. The company transferred the amount, more than half of which ended up in the pockets of our dear friends. So, Marisol knew about the plot, Lucia murmured, trying to calm her trembling. I don't think so. At least, not at first. But when she came to my house that day, Marisol wanted to find out what I knew and how soundly I was thinking. If it weren't for my assistant Rosa, I doubt I could have opened the director's eyes to the people he trusted as much as himself. Lucia stared at Benjamin in disbelief, struggling to grasp the idea that someone would go to such lengths for money. You look pale, Benjamin observed. Would you like some water? No, it's all right. But what now? What will happen to Federico and to your? She's no longer mine. And as for Federico, let the director deal with him. It's no longer our problem, Benjamin replied. As they say, the competent authorities will take care of him. At least, my position won't be his to take. And what about you, Lucia? I expect you to be at work next Monday. Please don't be late. So, that's why I had to get a job? Lucia protested, so there would be nowhere else to go? Exactly. Besides, I took a look at your resume. I pulled it from the dresser the day before the interview while you were washing up. It suits me just fine. Benjamin smiled. The following days were restless. Benjamin had visited the investigator and reluctantly picked up his phone. He hesitated before answering any calls. Despite Lucia's attempts to ask him what was going on, Benjamin would only joke, though his appearance showed deep concern. One evening, while Benjamin locked himself in the bathroom with the shower running, Lucia couldn't resist. She cautiously picked up his phone and started looking through the call history. And then she opened a message. She should not have done that. Threats were pouring in from different numbers directed at Benjamin. Lucia immediately understood that it was all Federico's doing. Benjamin's former colleague feared retaliation, so he was trying to force him to give false testimony. Federico was doing a poor job at it. And when Benjamin didn't react to the monetary reward, he resorted to intimidation. After putting the phone back in its place, Lucia sank into the chair and covered her face with her hands. Outside, it was already dark. The wind rustled, long ago having blown away the last gilded leaves from the trees. The small room felt cozy and warm. The dim light of a night lamp barely illuminated the space, creating whimsical shadows on the walls and ceiling. Lucia opened her eyes and wiped her wet lashes with the edge of her sleeve, trying to hide the traces of her despair as quickly as possible. She believed in a long and happy life. She believed, despite the events happening around her, which often gave reasons to doubt and stop dreaming. Her parents, she loved them with all her heart, but due to different circumstances, they were no longer by her side. Benjamin. Benjamin was the one, and Lucia knew it from the moment he opened his eyes and spoke her name, lying on the cold, damp ground. But confessing that was scary because above all, she feared losing him. "You're crying," the familiar voice said. Lucia trembled and only then noticed Benjamin standing in the doorway. "No, I was just lost in thought." "About what?" "Work. I have to go soon. Tomorrow, I'll call about accommodation. I found a couple of options near the company." "I've found something for you too," Benjamin said somewhat oddly as he approached. "A 3-room apartment on the 8th floor, all-inclusive, and it's already paid for. It's only a 10-minute commute to work." True, the neighbor is quite grumpy and sometimes leaves his socks in the middle of the bathroom, but he'll improve, I promise. "Benjamin, thank you, but..." "Objections are not accepted." "But I don't want to be a burden to you." Benjamin smiled and approached the chair, extending his hand to her. That night, for the first time in a long while, Lucia didn't turn off the night lamp and forgot to check her phone's alarm. Her mind was elsewhere. In the morning, they were awakened by a loud, prolonged ringing coming from the hallway. Struggling to open her eyes, Lucia blushed, remembering the events of the previous night, and hurried to the door. Peering through the peephole, she was taken aback because she was prepared to see anyone but her mother. "Lucia, it's me," Jasmine exclaimed, pressing the doorbell again. "Open up, I know you're home." Lucia quickly tied her robe and unlocked the door. Before she could collect herself, her mother rushed into the hallway. Glancing at her daughter with a critical look, Jasmine said, "You look terrible." "Thanks, Mom, and good morning to you too." "Are you still sulking at me?" "Me? I think it's you who got offended and slammed the door." "Don't twist the truth," Jasmine pursed her lips. "I forgave you a long time ago, but you haven't called me even once." Suddenly, Jasmine fell silent and her eyes widened. "And you still haven't kicked him out?" "Him? Benjamin?" Lucia sighed. "What difference does his name make? I can hear him rummaging around in there." Jasmine pointed towards the room and then noticed a men's jacket hanging on the coat rack, shaking her head. "You're waiting for him to steal everything from your apartment, aren't you?" "Mom, did you come here just to argue again?" "Lucia, who's there?" Benjamin shouted, loudly yawning. "He already feels at home," Jasmine said. "It's Mom. Wait for me here. I want to talk to her." "Okay," he nodded and pulled her closer, holding her hand. "Benjamin, she'll hear," Lucia protested. "Well, fine, fine." Leaving the room, Lucia looked at her displeased mother, and her cheeks immediately flushed with shame. No matter how hard she tried to get used to that look over all these years, it just never worked. Every time Lucia saw her mother like that, she broke into a cold sweat, feeling like a little girl who had misbehaved once again. "I wanted to call you," Lucia began. "Well, I found a job where I wanted to. I'm moving in the next few days." "So, you'll be paying rent to other people?" Jasmine snorted. "And what will be left from your salary, Lucia?" "Benjamin suggested that I move in with him." Jasmine gasped. her eyes flashing with anger. Lucia clasped her hands together, bracing herself for the wave of indignation that was about to engulf her, but at that moment, footsteps were heard behind her. "Good morning, Jasmine," exclaimed Benjamin. "I'm very glad to see you." "I can't say the same," she replied coldly. "Too bad I didn't have a chance to thank you properly last time." "For what?" "For raising an amazing daughter. Kind, smart, and compassionate. By the way, she'll be working at the same company as me. I doubt you'll be crossing paths. An economist usually works in comfort. Can't say the same about a janitor." "Mom, stop it," Lucia couldn't hold back. "Benjamin is the deputy director." After these words, Jasmine seemed to lose her ability to speak. She looked at Benjamin, then at her daughter, and simply didn't know what to say. "This is not funny," Jasmine protested. "You really expect me to believe that? He doesn't remember anything. And how can he be a deputy director?" "Medicine works wonders," Benjamin smiled. "So, you really are the deputy director?" "Lucia said she found you on the street under a bush." "That's right," he nodded. "Actually, I'm not a fan of sleeping on wet grass, especially in the fall, but it happened. And you know the reason. I don't have parents, and my closest relatives live far away. So no one was in a hurry to look for me. The only person, your Lucia, called an ambulance, helped me, and that means a lot." "Well, if that's the case," Jasmine gave her daughter an annoyed look and forced a smile. "Lucia said she's moving in with you, and I was upset at first, but now I see it was for nothing." "Well, I won't bother you then." "Mom, are you leaving already?" "Stay, Jasmine, let's have some tea and chat," Benjamin offered. No, I have so much to do. I just stopped by briefly, wanted to make peace." A few more minutes, Jasmine exchanged pleasantries with Benjamin, smiling broadly, then slipped out the door. "Am I dreaming? Was that really my mother?" Lucia whispered. "Definitely," Benjamin grinned, embracing her waist. "What surprises you?" "She's in a good mood and even allowed me to move to another city." "To you, that is." "Well, then you just have to agree," he said. Benjamin kissed her and went to the kitchen to prepare breakfast, while Lucia decided not to dwell on the details and not explain to him why her mother's mood had changed so drastically. Jasmine had always been fastidious and held great disdain for people who lived worse than her. Therefore, Lucia's father tried his best to provide a comfortable life for his wife and daughter. He knew that if he didn't, Jasmine would quickly find someone else. It was only then that Lucia finally understood why her father worked so hard. He was born into a poor family and didn't have the opportunity to receive a good education, and he always felt embarrassed to tell acquaintances that he worked as a simple truck driver. Yet, Jasmine would put him in his place every chance she got, reminding him of who he was and who she was. The end of October turned out to be special. Lucia finally moved to the small town she had long dreamed of. Benjamin's apartment was sunny and very spacious, and the kitchen was decorated in the color of lush green grass, which she liked the most. "So much tableware you have," she exclaimed, peering into the kitchen cabinet. "Well, is it a lot?" Benjamin chuckled. "This mixer, cake mold, are all of these yours?" "Okay, I give up. I love cooking. In my childhood, I even dreamed of becoming a chef, can you imagine? But then I changed my mind and went into business. I hope you'll appreciate my culinary skills." "Definitely. So, you know how to bake cakes?" "Well, yes." "Then, in a week, you'll have a reason to take one of these molds out," she said playfully. Benjamin looked at Lucia with bewilderment. "My birthday is on November 5th. And you didn't say anything? I could have missed it all." "Oh, come on, don't be upset. I don't know your birthday either." "The whole country celebrates my holiday," he blurted out and squinted, "on December 25th, and I received double congratulations." Lucia gasped, and Benjamin chuckled. "We're going back to work tomorrow," Benjamin announced, opening another box. "Are you ready?" "Yes, and no." And how are things with Federico and Marisol? Well, it's not a quick matter. So he's still free? Well, of course. Federico was fired from his job, he can't leave the city, but don't worry, everything will be fine. Benjamin, I'm surprised by your calmness, Lucia mumbled, what if he? No need to panic. Let's focus on other things. It's been a while since I cleaned up the closets, I found so many interesting things. He smiled and headed to the corridor for another box. Lucia watched him go and felt an inexplicable sense of anxiety. She knew that anything could happen in the near future. Her first day at work became a real trial, not because of the new documentation or getting to know colleagues, but because of unexpected news. At noon, when most employees had gone for lunch, Benjamin sent Lucia a message asking to meet. Oblivious to what was going on, she strolled down the long corridor paved with expensive brown tiles. Benjamin was waiting for her by the door, visibly agitated. Come in, he said. What's happened? Lucia asked. Listen, I don't even know where to start, sighed Benjamin, sinking into a chair. You better sit down. Federico has left town, maybe even the country. What? What about Marisol? She's at home, says that Federico left her and took all their savings with him. How could this happen? Exclaimed Lucia, feeling her head spinning. Well, Federico always had good connections. He mentioned once that his sister lives in Italy. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's already sipping tea with her company. Well, maybe it's for the best. But what if he decides to retaliate against you? I'm not sure. He can forget about his position now. He left Marisol, you could say the conflict is over, Benjamin smiled. We're starting a new life. I hope so, Lucia replied, uncertainly. Benjamin looked at Lucia and shook his head, saying, Lucia, you still haven't told me what you want as a gift. Except for the cake, of course. Get well soon, that's all I need, replied Lucia. I think I'll recover faster if I keep working. There are still a few issues to deal with, but they are minor compared to what I went through before. Do you remember what the doctor said? Lucia reminded him. Don't overwork yourself.
Yeah.
I know, Benjamin waved his hand dismissively. I won't stay late today. We should celebrate your first day at work and mine. That's a good idea. But I'm afraid colleagues might think we're having a romance, Lucia replied. Well, aren't they already aware? Benjamin chuckled. I'm not sure about the tech team, but the HR department colleagues already congratulated me, Lucia explained. Teresa and Veronica. Oh, they saw that you gave me a ride to work. Well, your colleagues seem like friendly ladies, and we had coffee together, so don't judge them too harshly, Benjamin laughed. I'm glad I made some friends. Marisol couldn't get along with them, Lucia said, and then quickly added, sorry, I didn't mean to compare. Compare? Lucia smiled. No worries. Is Marisol still around here often? She used to come every other day, but now, I hope we won't run into each other again, Benjamin replied. With a satisfied nod, Lucia stood up and prepared to leave. And what about a kiss from the boss? Benjamin asked teasingly, drawing out the words. But of course. Lucia replied, playing along. When the first workday came to an end, Lucia got into Benjamin's car and immediately received an invitation from him to a restaurant. Maybe we should go to a cafe instead? There's a lovely place just across from your house, Benjamin suggested. Are you serious? Lucia asked. Of course. I'd feel more comfortable laughing and eating pizza with my hands than trying to manage all those utensils, he replied. I understand. I'm not a fan of fancy places either, but I have to go to them quite often. And that cafe serves delicious pizza, I can vouch for it, Lucia said. I'm glad your memory of me is coming back, Lucia remarked. Well, let's see how well you remember the menu. Laughing, he stroked her hair and started the engine. The car purred pleasantly and moved smoothly within seconds. The evening in Benjamin's company was simply wonderful. It was their first dinner outside their homes, exchanging their casual favorite attire for formal wear. Benjamin looked so dignified and masculine in his expensive suit and blue shirt that Lucia couldn't take her eyes off him. He was almost back to his old self. His mind was clear, and dizziness was gone. His gaze, once murky and weary, now shone brightly with happiness. Of course, he still needed to visit the doctor and continue his treatment, but the worst was behind him. The week flew by unnoticed. The morning Benjamin had been eagerly anticipating finally arrived. As Lucia opened her eyes, she gasped in surprise. Colorful balloons filled the entire ceiling of the bedroom. Sleep vanished instantly. Sitting up in bed, she looked at this magnificent sight, unable to recall if anyone had ever given her such beauty. On the nightstand, Lucia noticed a small envelope with a note, "Welcome to the living room." Like a little girl, she quickly jumped out of bed, wrapped herself in a robe, and left the bedroom. "Good morning, birthday girl," Benjamin greeted her with a big smile. "Your gift is waiting for you on the nightstand near the window. But before you open it, promise me you won't say anything. All right?" "What are you talking about?" Lucia asked in surprise. "You'll see. Just promise," he insisted. "Okay, I promise," Lucia agreed. He stepped aside, allowing her to pass. On a small snow-white nightstand, Lucia noticed a red box with a satin ribbon. With trembling hands, she lifted the lid and found a golden chain with a pendant inside. There was also a note. Benjamin observed with interest as Lucia unfolded the paper, and after a few seconds, she turned to him. "But," she managed to utter. "You promised not to say anything," he reminded her. "Thank you," the girl whispered. "It's very beautiful. But, I suppose, it must be very expensive. Can't I show my gratitude for saving my life?" Benjamin squinted playfully. "Of course. But about the note." He shook his head and took her hand. "We'll talk about it later, Lucia, later. It's time to blow out the candles." "I tried my best, honestly," Benjamin whispered and led her to the kitchen, where a chocolate cake awaited them. Amidst the whirlwind of events, Lucia didn't even notice another week passing by. And finally, what she had been waiting for happened. Cold, light as feathers, sparkling snowflakes slowly descended to the ground. At that moment, Benjamin parked the car near the house. Lucia stepped outside, extending her hand, trying to catch the snowflakes in her palm. "The first snow, it's so wonderful. I always eagerly anticipated winter in my childhood." "Christmas is coming soon," she said. "By the way, have you thought about where you'll celebrate it?" Benjamin asked. Lucia turned sharply. "And you?" "Well, I'd like to celebrate it with you. And it doesn't matter where, to be honest. We could invite your mother if she's available." "No need to," Lucia replied. "Why not?" "Well, my mom, how can I put it gently, doesn't like celebrating holidays with family. She attends work parties, friends' birthdays, but not at home." "But don't tell me you never had a Christmas tree," Benjamin remarked. "No, we did, of course. But there were no festive gatherings. Because around 11 p.m., my mom would always go to bed." "That's odd." "You mean to say she's a strange woman?" Lucia corrected him. "You know, I'm used to it. Of course, she's my mom, and I should love and cherish her. But you know, it's easier for me to do that from a distance. Not to let her into my life, and especially not to invite her for celebrations." Benjamin sighed and embraced Lucia. "Let's go to your place," she whispered softly. "It's our place, Lucia, it's ours," he replied. "Oh," a familiar voice sounded. Lucia and Benjamin turned around and noticed Marisol. She stood nearby, crossing her arms over her chest, observing the couple with a look that made Lucia feel like Marisol was taking lessons from Jasmine. "What do you want?" Lucia asked. I see you're not happy to see me, Marisol said. Well, we need to talk, and it's better to do it in private. We have nothing to talk about, Lucia replied. Usually self-assured and slightly haughty, Marisol suddenly changed her demeanor. Tears welled up in her eyes, and her lips trembled. Please, Benjamin, it's very important, she pleaded. I'll wait for you, Lucia suddenly said. Are you sure? Benjamin asked. Of course, I'll put the kettle on, and it's so cold outside, warming up won't hurt, Lucia said, forcing a smile. She pecked him on the cheek and disappeared into the entrance. Lucia reached the 8th floor on foot, scolding herself for what she had done. The prospect of leaving Benjamin alone with his ex-girlfriend did not bring her any joy. Yet, she knew she had no right to forbid him anything. Deep down, Lucia believed that Benjamin would never go back to Marisol. His former fiancée had treated him too cruelly, abandoning him when he needed her the most. Upon entering her apartment, Lucia quickly took off her boots, hung her coat on the hanger, and walked into the room, pressing herself against the window. Benjamin and Marisol were still standing in the parking lot. Benjamin gestured quickly, saying something, while Marisol repeatedly tried to take his hand, as if pleading for something. Those few minutes while Lucia watched from afar felt like an eternity. The mere thought of Benjamin going back to his former flame made her heart ache. However, contrary to the bleak scenarios her imagination conjured, Benjamin managed to break free from Marisol's grasp and headed towards the building. Marisol shouted something after him and then took out her phone, pressing it to her ear as she walked away. Lucia, where are you? Benjamin called out upon entering the hallway. What did she say to you? Lucia asked, feeling flustered as she approached him. She asked me to stop investigating the assault case, he replied. And what did you say? She swore that she loves Federico and dreams of marrying him, so I feel obligated to help him. After all, it's my fault. It's my fault that Federico has to go into hiding. But he stole money from Marisol and left her. It seems that fairy tale was concocted for the investigation, and in reality, he hasn't left the country yet. What are you going to do? Nothing. I won't change my statement, that would be going too far. For the past year, Federico has been dreaming of taking my place. He did everything to get me fired, Benjamin sighed. When Marisol realized that I wouldn't save her beloved, she wanted to blame me for all her troubles, but then... He chuckled, then she changed her mind and asked me for a loan. A little something, just a couple of million. How much? Lucia gasped.
Yeah.
I was surprised too, Benjamin said. But I guess it's not surprising with her. And I do have the money. But where did you get that kind of money? I can't even imagine how much it is. And why would she need so much? Lucia asked, bewildered. Benjamin smiled and took Lucia's hand, guiding her to sit next to him on the couch. I'm not used to living with empty pockets. I've always relied only on myself, so I always had and still have funds for a rainy day. Marisol knows about it, and at one point, she even threw tantrums because I wouldn't agree to buy her a new luxury car. Don't get me wrong, I wasn't stingy, but that car cost twice as much as this apartment. And she wasn't satisfied with a slightly less fancy model. I may be the deputy director, but I'm far from being an oligarch, Benjamin explained. Lucia gazed at him for a couple of seconds, seemingly lost in thought, and then spoke softly. It's strange that she asked you for money, considering how she treated you. I don't know what she's up to, but I don't like it either, Benjamin replied. He fell silent, as if contemplating something, and then gently ran his hand over Lucia's cheek, saying softly, All right, let's talk about something more pleasant. I remember you promised me a hot tea or coffee. Well, I haven't made it to the kitchen yet, Lucia admitted, feeling a bit embarrassed. No problem, we can do it together. Besides, I saw some good coffee beans in the pantry. Let's go, he suggested. The next morning, Lucia woke up earlier than usual and, noticing that Benjamin was still asleep, carefully got out from under the covers. The kitchen was chilly, with a fresh frosty air seeping in through the slightly opened window, and outside, the roofs, the ground, and the trees were covered in a white blanket of snow. Winter comes so quickly. It feels like summer just started not long ago, Lucia whispered, closing the window. Lost in her thoughts, Lucia was interrupted by a sudden ringtone from her phone. Her mom's photo appeared on the screen. "Hi. Where's my daughter? Left and disappeared?" Jasmine chattered. "Hi, Mom. No, everything's fine, I just went to work." Slowly settling in, Lucia replied. "So, you're living with him after all?" "Yes." "You shouldn't have ignored my advice, Lucia. You really shouldn't have. But, of course, do as you see fit. You have a day off tomorrow, right? You'll probably be home. I urgently need your help. So, come over to my place in the morning." "Did something happen?" Lucia became concerned. "When you come, I'll tell you everything. I'll be waiting for you at home at 10 a.m. "All right. But can you at least explain what happened?" "It's important and urgent," her mother exclaimed. "Isn't that enough?" "Okay, I'll come." "Good. Just come alone. See you later." From the receiver came frequent beeps. Lucia placed her mobile on the table and only now noticed Benjamin at the door. "Who was calling?" he asked, stretching. "Mom. She asked me to come over tomorrow." "Why?" "I don't know, she didn't say," Lucia shrugged. "She's been acting strangely lately. Sometimes she's upset, and then she tries to make amends. I'll go for a short while and find out what's going on." "We can never know what we'll be like at that age," Benjamin smiled. "Can I come with you?" "No, it's not necessary." "So Jasmine still doesn't trust me," he smirked. "Well, it's okay, we'll find common ground with her eventually. I'll take you there, and then pick you up. I might be a little late, though. I promised the director to stop by work. I have a lot of tasks piled up. You know, I can manage by myself, take the bus, and you go to work." "Are you sure?" Lucia nodded and, adding some milk to her coffee, handed him the mug. Saturday morning was cold but sunny. Sitting on the bus, Lucia looked out the window and waved her hand. Benjamin stood waiting, smiling. Finally, the doors closed, and the slow white bus headed toward the station exit. The phone came to life, and a short text message from Benjamin appeared on the screen. "Call me when you arrive. I'll be waiting. Already missing you." And time seemed to stand still. Passing through the villages, the bus would often slow down, stopping to let passengers off. When it finally reached the familiar small town, Lucia was on edge, wishing only one thing: to be home as soon as possible. Pushing and chatting, the passengers got off, dragging heavy bags behind them. The smell of exhaust fumes filled the air, making eyes water. Lucia jumped off the bottom step and hurried home. The narrow asphalt path was covered with ice. Sharp, cold snowflakes kept hitting her face, and her cheeks were freezing from the unfamiliar cold. After walking through several alleys, she turned right and stopped when she saw the all-too-familiar 5-story building. The yard was empty, and in the children's playground, not renovated for many, many years, a lonely metal slide stood. Slightly to the side, old creaky swings. Lucia vividly remembered how her father laughed when she screamed with delight while sliding down, begging him not to leave and to catch her in his arms at the bottom. Dad. If he were still alive, things would probably be different. Clenching her teeth, she reluctantly tore her gaze away from the playground and quickly walked to the entrance doors, completely unaware of what awaited her ahead. After the third prolonged ring at the door, there was some commotion on the other side, and her mother appeared on the threshold. Clad in a simple home robe with disheveled hair, she looked as if she had just gotten out of bed. "Oh, it's you," Jasmine yawned. "Come in." "Mom, did I wake you up?" "No, I was just boiling the kettle. You know I can't wake up without a cup of coffee. And it's a gloomy morning today." "Sleepy." "Mom, what happened?" Lucia asked, closing the door behind her. Jasmine widened her eyes and looked at her daughter with surprise. Mom, you asked me to come. Urgently, Lucia patiently reminded her. That's right. Take off your shoes and come in. The kettle will boil soon, and then we can talk. Not wanting to dwell on details, her mother yawned once again and headed to the kitchen. With a heavy sigh, Lucia took off her boots, hung her jacket on the hook, and took out her mobile phone from her pocket. What are you doing there? Her mother called from the kitchen. I'm coming, Lucia said, typing a message to Benjamin. In the small room, a pleasant coffee aroma hung in the air. Her mother had already set 2 yellow cups adorned with tulips on the table and was slowly pouring hot water into them. The coffee is just so, Jasmine remarked. You're probably used to better, but you know, I have to cut corners on everything. Mom, let's get to the point. You asked me to come. Will you tell me what happened? You probably think I don't love you and wish only bad things for my daughter. But know that it's not true. When I asked you to get rid of that shady guy, you laughed in my face, and for no reason, Lucia protested. Mom, don't tell me you called me here for that, Lucia said, taken aback. Listen to me first, and then you can interrupt, her mother declared loudly. Lucia nodded, realizing that she had come here in vain. She really didn't want to spend an hour listening to lectures and then end up arguing with her closest person, only to return to the city feeling completely drained. That's how their meetings often ended, with her mother trying to teach Lucia about life and criticizing everything she did. But there was no turning back now, so the only option was to listen and nod, dreaming of leaving her once beloved apartment as soon as possible. A few days ago, someone called me, Jasmine suddenly said, and gave me some very interesting information about your Benjamin. And who called you? Turns out, he was in prison. Did you know about it? Tell me honestly, did you know? Lucia stepped back and stared at her mother with wide eyes. He changes girlfriends like gloves. Don't you really think you're special? Lucia, just look at yourself. Mom, you didn't answer who called you? One of his ex-girlfriends. She saw you two together and decided to warn me. A very nice girl, by the way, well-mannered. Marisol? How should I know? She didn't introduce herself. She only said that they dated for 6 months, and then he dumped her, and it was, 2 years ago. And after that, she lost some money that she, for some reason, kept at home. Silly girl. She thinks Benjamin took it with him. And there's no one else it could have been. So, you believed some crazy woman and dragged me out of the house on my day off just to tell me this nonsense? I worry about you, can't you see? It seemed to me from the start that something was off about him, and as you can see, my intuition didn't fail me. Of course, Lucia smirked, intuition. I think you just dream of having me move back here. Yes, that would be better, Jasmine shrugged, what's wrong with that? You didn't want to let me go. You were against me buying an apartment, becoming independent. I still don't understand why you took out a mortgage and paid a fortune when I have 2 empty rooms. Even if things don't work out with Benjamin, I won't come back here. Ever since Dad passed away, all we do is argue. Mom, you just have no one else to vent on. What are you saying? I loved him too, Jasmine whispered, her eyes glistening with tears. Yes, we argued sometimes, but who doesn't? When I was left alone, I was scared, you know. If you had come back home, everything would have been different. With a heavy sigh, Lucia sat down on a chair. We can't seem to live peacefully, and you know that, Lucia said quietly. Benjamin has nothing to do with it. I don't understand why you've turned against him. Or are you afraid that I'll have my own family? Don't you want me to be happy? Wiping a tear from her cheek, Jasmine lowered her gaze to the floor. She looked so vulnerable and defenseless that Lucia couldn't help but feel sorry for her. Mom. No matter who she was still her mom. If I get married, it doesn't mean you won't be a part of my life anymore, Lucia whispered, taking her mother's hand. And I don't believe any of these stories about Benjamin. It was probably Marisol, his ex, who called you. And she has a reason to be angry with him. I feel so alone, Jasmine sobbed, her shoulders shaking with tears. Then let's go back to the city. I invited you with me. We could buy an apartment nearby and see each other often. Jasmine smiled through her tears. I'll think about it. Drink your coffee, I'll get some pie. I completely forgot about it with all these conversations, and I made your favorite, with cherries. Thank you. Do you really love him? Yes, Mom, I do. Okay. I'll try to get used to him, her mother sighed and stood up. As she wiped her tears, she opened the fridge, and Lucia felt a warm sensation, finally breathing a sigh of relief. Everything that the mysterious stranger said, she considered lies, so it didn't bother her at all. Let me help, Lucia quickly said, taking a plate from the cupboard. A couple of hours of heartfelt conversation later, they reluctantly bid each other farewell. Lucia put on her jacket, tightly wrapped a scarf around her neck, and hugged her mom before leaving the apartment. As she descended the stairs, she suddenly remembered that she had promised to call Benjamin. The phone took a moment to locate. With it in her hands, she had already reached the first floor, where it was as dark as usual. She pressed the button to unlock the screen when suddenly, Lucia felt an unbearable pain in the back of her head, and then everything went dark. Her eyes didn't want to open, and her consciousness was muddled. The voices around her wouldn't stop, demanding that she wake up. Lucia. Struggling against the overwhelming desire to fall back asleep, Lucia opened her eyes slightly. The unfamiliar pale room spun around her, and the floor and ceiling seemed to switch places. Lucia, finally, exclaimed a painfully familiar male voice. She tried to focus her gaze on the person standing next to her and recognized Benjamin after a couple of seconds. You? Don't worry, everything is fine. Do you remember me? Benjamin, what happened? Lucia mumbled, glancing around the room, which turned out to be a hospital ward for some reason. Benjamin's face changed, and he reluctantly replied, You fell, but it's nothing serious. There are very good doctors here. Do you remember my doctor, Emmanuel? He promised that you'll recover quickly. I was hit? Yes, but let's talk about that later. Rest. I managed to persuade the nurses to let me see you. Sleep. I'll come back later. Obediently closing her eyes, Lucia once again sank into the dark abyss, surprised at how quickly she could fall asleep, something that had never happened to her before. Several days passed, during which Benjamin constantly visited Lucia. He joked that he was paying off his debt with buns and fruits, told her about work news, and described how the snowdrifts grew with each passing day. But he never mentioned what had happened. Whenever Lucia brought up that fateful day, he would immediately change the subject. But on one of the days when Lucia was feeling much better, she declared, An investigator came to me today. He asked a lot of questions, but I still don't know much. If you don't tell me the truth, I'll ask the nurses not to let you into the ward. Are you serious? Benjamin was surprised. Of course not, but I want to know what happened. Please. Benjamin leaned towards her and said with regret, What happened was that I shouldn't have let you go alone to your mom's place. When you didn't call, and your phone was turned off, I rushed to the road to find you. But I didn't know where you or your mom lived. Fortunately, my connections helped me, and by the time I got to the city, Rosa found out where your mom lived. When I arrived at her place, I saw a crowd near the entrance. Benjamin fell silent, and then continued quietly, A neighbor found you under the stairs on the first floor and scared off some guy. Then she called an ambulance, informed your mom about the incident. And only after that, help was needed not only for you but for her too. How is my mom? Lucia exclaimed. She's in the hospital, but she's getting better, and she'll be discharged in a couple of days. Don't worry, I'll take care of her too. Everything will be all right, I promise, he whispered. Who did this? They have already been arrested, there's nothing to worry about anymore. It was Federico, right? Wasn't it? Yes, it was him. But why? Federico decided to act in his usual way. Only this time, he didn't hire anyone, he followed you himself and waited in the entrance. I don't know what he was thinking at that moment. Maybe he hoped to keep you with him until I changed my testimony. Or maybe. Well, it doesn't matter now. He went too far, and when he realized what he had done and heard footsteps on the stairs, he simply ran away. Mom said she received a call from some girl. Marisol? They wanted to lure you out of the city far away from me. And Jasmine was just worried about you and, of course, knew nothing about Federico's plans. Marisol knows how to be convincing. He moved closer and gently stroked Lucia's head, trying to comfort her somehow. And what will happen to them now, she murmured. They will receive the punishment they deserve. And this time, they won't escape. With her nose pressed against his shoulder, Lucia let out a relieved sigh. Now everything was supposed to be fine. She wanted to believe it so much. And a week later, when all the trees and the ground were covered in a sparkling warm blanket of pure white snowflakes, the day of discharge arrived. Lucia was more excited than ever and eager to see her mom. Jasmine had been discharged 5 days ago, and she was already back home under the care of an experienced nurse whom Benjamin had hired despite Lucia's mother's protests and objections. There was no reason to worry, but Lucia still wanted to talk to her as soon as possible. Let's go see Mom, Lucia asked as soon as Benjamin entered the room. But you need rest, he replied. I'm begging you, I need to see her. And then you can take me to your place and tuck me in, I promise. Not to my place, but to our place, Benjamin sighed. He looked Lucia up and down and smiled. What's wrong? I can see you're already on the road to recovery, you even dressed yourself, he teased. Lucia frowned and intertwined her fingers. Seeing this, Benjamin laughed. All right. Don't be mad. Men need help, but you women are independent. I remember when I was discharged, you wouldn't even let me tie my shoes by myself. It's not funny at all. Why not? Benjamin, I really want to talk to her. Okay, he smiled, the discharge is ready, so we can go. You'll see your mom, and then we'll go home. He took her hand and led her into the corridor. As they descended to the ground floor, Lucia suddenly noticed Estella. The fair-haired woman immediately broke into a smile. Oh, Lucia, Benjamin, how glad I am to see you together here. Hello, Lucia smiled, blushing. Take care, both of you, Estella said, of course, I'll miss you, but I hope there won't be any more need for you to come here as patients. You'd better visit us just for fun. We will, for sure, nodded Benjamin, we'll drop by when we send out the wedding invitations. You'll come, won't you? Of course, replied Estella. Lucia widened her eyes and stared at Benjamin, but he just smiled as if nothing unusual had happened. After saying
Goodbye
to Estella, he led Lucia to the car. Did I hear correctly? She inquired. Yes, but it all depends on you. Let's discuss it at home. Alone. He opened the car door and, hiding his smile, helped her fasten the seatbelt. When they arrived home, Jasmine opened the door, and upon seeing Lucia, she smiled uncertainly. Her facial expression didn't give away whether she was genuinely happy to see her daughter or not. Hi, Mom, Lucia's voice trembled betrayingly. Come in, Jasmine waved her hand. Then, with reproach in her eyes directed at Benjamin, she added, you can take your nurse with you. Right now. I'm not at the age where I need someone to look after me. I can handle the doctor's orders myself. I understand that you haven't gotten along with her, sighed Benjamin. I don't need anyone's care, and I won't repeat it again to you. All right. Then I'll ask her to leave. Well, that's just fine, grumbled Jasmine and walked back to her room. A plump middle-aged woman with a waffle towel in her hands peeked out from the kitchen. She had short dark hair, kind gray eyes, and a slight blush on her cheeks. Smiling genuinely, the stranger exclaimed, Hello, Benjamin. And you must be Lucia. Your mom is doing well, blood pressure is normal. But her mood. Hello, Benjamin sighed. About her mood, I noticed. By the way, you can start getting ready to leave. I think Jasmine has recovered enough by now. But you paid me for a month. Don't worry about it. You can keep the money for your excellent work. It's challenging to find such a caring and devoted assistant these days. I think my mom is not happy to see me, Lucia whispered, feeling a slight dizziness. She had imagined this meeting quite differently. She thought her mother would behave differently, not so cold and distant as before. Maybe Jasmine just didn't get enough rest? Or it's the magnetic storms? She was really worried about you, which means she cares about you. Taking off her coat, Lucia slowly walked into the room. Her mom was sitting on the couch near the window, looking away. Mom, how are you? Lucia asked. Fine, Jasmine replied. Are you angry with me? Am I angry? Jasmine said, very. Because you got involved with that guy. And because of him, you ended up in the hospital. I told you to get rid of him. But, as always, you're so clever. What does Benjamin have to do with this? He has everything to do with it. Mom, I came to see how you're doing, not to argue, Lucia sighed, sinking into a soft armchair. Have you thought about moving? I'll rest for a bit, and then we could find an apartment for you nearby. It's a peaceful neighborhood, a lovely place, and there's a park nearby. I'm not going anywhere, Jasmine snorted. But you said you couldn't be alone. Jasmine shook her head and picked up an unfinished book from the nightstand. Pretending as if the conversation was already over, she found the right page and immersed herself in reading. Why are you acting like this? Lucia whispered. I have my own life. Both of you can leave, Jasmine replied coldly. Silence fell in the room. Jasmine fell silent and stubbornly acted as if no one else was there but her. Unable to bear the prolonged silence, Lucia stood up and headed for the hallway. She had already put on her boots and coat when Benjamin emerged from the kitchen. Are we leaving already? He asked in surprise. Lucia, what happened? Let's go home, she said, quickly rushing down the staircase. The cold snowflakes whirled chaotically, making it impossible to breathe. For a few seconds, Lucia stood alone in front of the entrance, trying to calm herself. Then the door slammed shut, and Benjamin appeared before her. Why did you rush out like that? It's like you thought the house was on fire. She doesn't want to see me, Lucia admitted. I thought things would change. That we could communicate, but, no. All right, here's the plan, he said, we're going home now. I'll tuck you into bed, prepare a delicious dinner, and we'll peacefully enjoy the quiet. As for your mom, I don't know what else to say. She loves you, Lucia, but in her own way. Forcing a smile, Lucia nodded. By the way, I have a little surprise for you. Remember that note I left you on your birthday? Of course. Well, there you go, he embraced her tightly, then took her hand and led her to the car. Don't be upset, Lucia. By the way. What? I love you, he said and smiled. Let's go home. They reached home fairly quickly, enjoying pleasant music and admiring the beauty outside the window. Snow covered everything, and even the branches of ancient firs were draped in a white veil, glistening in the headlights' light. Upon entering the apartment, Benjamin helped Lucia take off her outerwear, and as promised, he tucked her into bed. Just to warn you, she declared, I won't stay lying here all day. You promised to listen to me, he replied. But, Benjamin, I'll go crazy from boredom. Yes, it wasn't fun for me either, he reminded her, but don't worry, you won't be bored. Wait a moment, I'll be right back. He winked at her and left the room, only to return a couple of minutes later with a bouquet of flowers in his hands. Is it my birthday again? Lucia smiled. Benjamin shook his head and sat on the edge of the bed. Do you remember the question from the note? Of course, she blushed. So, what's your answer? I think Lucia Alonso sounds beautiful. Don't you like it? He asked. I do, but why didn't you let me answer right away when I read the note? I would have said yes, then. Well, I wanted you to think about it, Benjamin confessed. So you agree, then? Yes. The roses are very beautiful, she said, examining the bouquet. Yes, but you don't like them, Benjamin smiled. I should have asked. When I went to the flower shop, I realized I didn't even know what flowers you like. But I think you'll have plenty of time to find out, Lucia said. You won't be bored, he continued, trying to hide his excitement. We need to make a guest list. Choose a date for the celebration because I'm not the best organizer. Lucia closed her eyes for a moment, still not believing what was happening, and then burst into laughter, imagining how her dear friend Celia would react to the latest news. You're getting married? Celia exclaimed upon hearing Lucia's joyful news. When? Just don't tell me the celebration is scheduled for next year. My due date is at the end of January, and knowing my luck, I'll be giving birth just when you're going to the registry office. On January 15th. Lucia. But even if you can't make it, I'll still love you. You bet I'll be there, no doubt. It's a shame it's not in December, you could have had it on December 25th, for example. 2 celebrations in one day, Celia laughed. That won't work. It's Benjamin's birthday on that day, Lucia informed her. And what about your mom? Remembering her last encounter with her mom, Lucia's expression darkened, and she listened to the sounds coming from the kitchen. Benjamin was still busy preparing something, making clattering noises with the dishes, so he couldn't hear her. I think my mom won't come, she said reluctantly. Did you have another argument? Telling her friend about the conversation with Jasmine and describing her reaction to Benjamin's help, Lucia fell silent. She felt upset for Benjamin, as he meant well and hadn't done anything wrong to Jasmine. Moreover, she seemed to have lost hope of ever having a normal relationship with her mother. You know, I have a feeling like she's upset with you for something or maybe even jealous of something, Celia said. After Dad's death, she became very irritable. We didn't get along well even before, and now it's even more complicated. For now, just leave her alone, her friend advised, maybe things will change with time. Anyway, I'm really happy for you. Fernando was thrilled when I told him. Lucia smiled. Fernando? Yes, I liked the name Leonardo, and so did he, Celia replied. It's a wonderful name, Lucia confirmed. We should meet. I haven't seen your Benjamin yet. You know what? You're right, Lucia exclaimed, it's almost his birthday, and if you're not too tired, I suggest we celebrate it together? Me? Tired? I'm going crazy sitting indoors all day while Leonardo works all day, Celia said, let's meet and get to know each other. Great. At our place? Of course. Tell Benjamin he's going to have a very noisy birthday. They laughed and chatted for a few more minutes before saying their goodbyes. As Lucia was about to put her phone on the nightstand, Benjamin entered the room. Give me the number of this magician who made you smile, he declared loudly. What if she comes here? Seriously? Yes, how about celebrating Christmas with a lively and noisy company? Lucia smiled. So it was Celia, then count me in, he nodded and hugged Lucia's shoulders, it seems like Christmas is going to be fun. How do you feel? Great. Can I get up? It's too early, Lucia. And what about work, she reminded him, I'll get fired if I'm just lazing around at home. Well, I have a friend who's a deputy director, he'll handle everything, Benjamin said. Despite his smiles and teasing, his eyes still looked sad. Did something happen, she asked, I heard you received a call. It's nothing, just some nonsense, he dismissed. He sighed heavily and sat on the edge of the bed. Mom called, Marisol's mother. She's upset and thinks I ruined her daughter's life. You? Does she know what actually happened? I think so, she just doesn't want to admit the obvious, and I understand that. After all, she worries about her daughter. But the trial is coming up, and Marisol's parents are nervous. He paused for a few seconds, then added, they shouldn't have started all this. Maybe Federico would have gotten away with it, and I would have forgiven him in time. But after what he tried to do to you, I don't feel sorry for him now. Lucia looked thoughtfully at him and suddenly asked, I can't stop thinking about that conversation with Marisol. Why did she come to your house and ask for money? You said she's well off enough. Marisol doesn't need the money, that's why she asked for a lot. She knew I have millions, and she knew nobody would give it to her. In the conversation, she tried to find out if you had any relatives. Benjamin sighed. It was only after the attack that I understood why she smiled when she found out you weren't an orphan. I still blame myself for what I said. Does she love him so much that she would go that far? Lucia mumbled, shivering as she recalled the events of that fateful day. You mean Federico? Perhaps. Why else would she take such a risk? I couldn't believe Marisol would do something like that for someone. It seems she really does love him. He fell silent for a few minutes, then embraced Lucia tightly and whispered, and I love you, do you hear me? Christmas is coming, and all the bad will be in the past, so let's forget about them. On December 25th, at 8 o'clock in the evening, Benjamin approached the door and looked through the peephole before opening it. On the staircase stood a girl in a black hat, a voluminous gray down jacket that could no longer hide her rounded belly. She glanced Benjamin up and down and smiled pleasantly. Good evening, I'm Celia. And you must be Benjamin? Good evening, he replied, please come in, Lucia is setting the table, I'll call her right away. She unzipped her down jacket and, fanning herself with her hand, sat down on a small bench. By the way, happy birthday, Benjamin. Thank you. Leonardo, where are you hiding? Footsteps were heard on the staircase, and a few seconds later, a slender man appeared at the door. His forehead was covered with sweat, and his cheeks were red. In his hands, he held several heavy bags. The elevator is broken, can you imagine? I kept pressing the button, and nothing happened. Silence, Celia sighed, smiling, help me take off my shoes, I can't even bend down. Oh, and I forgot to introduce myself, Leonardo suddenly realized, extending his hand to Benjamin. We've already met through correspondence, please come in, Benjamin replied with a chuckle. Celia, Lucia exclaimed, coming out into the hallway. Benjamin observed the interaction between the friends with interest, while Leonardo mumbled something to himself, hanging their coats on the hooks. As long as the elevator isn't fixed, I'm not leaving this place. Celia warned, and considering that today is Christmas Eve, and finding a reliable repairman will be quite problematic, we stocked up on groceries for a reason. And an hour later, the whole group gathered around the table set in a small room. Celia laughed at Benjamin's jokes, clutching her belly, while Leonardo kept reaching for his glass. Listen, Lucia whispered to her friend, I haven't noticed before that Leonardo drinks so much. He's just nervous, worried about the little one. Honestly, I am too, but I can't drink, Celia chuckled. What's the latest news about Marisol and her boyfriend? The court hearing has been postponed twice already, Lucia replied quietly. I have a feeling that Marisol's connections are involved here. Benjamin mentioned that she's not an ordinary person. Her parents are wealthy. Celia shook her head and whispered, I think everything will be fine, don't stress yourself out. Lucia took a sip from her glass and then suddenly said, my mom called yesterday. Oh really? And? Well, she talked calmly, probably expecting me to apologize as usual. But when I told her about the wedding, she was silent for a long time, then wished me happiness and said,
Goodbye.
Jasmine never ceases to amaze me, honestly. So, she doesn't even want to attend her own daughter's wedding? No, but maybe it's for the best. You're right, you know, and I really liked Benjamin. He's the kind of man that suits you. Seriously? Lucia smiled, well then, I'm definitely marrying him without a second thought. Oh, you're just kidding, aren't you? Pour me more apple juice, the little one demands a refill. What are we talking about? Benjamin asked, noticing Lucia's contented smile. Oh, we're just guessing whether you're going to have a girl or a boy, Celia casually announced. Benjamin, surprised, loosened his grip on the glass he was holding, and a second later, the room echoed with the sound of shattering glass. Lucia, are you pregnant? He mumbled and stumbled over his words. No, Celia was just joking. And here I was thinking. He stared at his future wife, trying to understand if she was telling the truth or hiding something from him. I'm not pregnant, Lucia clarified, feeling her cheeks burning. All right, Benjamin sighed, looking at the shards near the table. Dishes break to bring good luck, Celia recalled. You won't even have time to look back, and Lucia will be on maternity leave. That's why I came to visit you. Lucia rolled her eyes and went to get a broom in the bathroom. In the corridor, she bumped into Benjamin, who looked agitated. So, is it true? He asked softly, hugging her around the waist. You? No, we just haven't talked about it. Would you want to? Of course, he exclaimed, and you? Lucia silently nodded. They stood there motionless for a few seconds, then Benjamin placed the broom on the floor and hugged her tightly, whispering something very pleasant in her ear. Her face lit up with a smile, and her eyes betrayed the tears of joy. Months had passed. On that cold spring morning, Lucia grabbed a hefty bag from the hallway and, a few minutes later, stepped outside. Benjamin was waiting for her near the entrance. Lucia, this bag is heavy. Well, I didn't know there would be so many things, she smiled. You shouldn't be carrying heavy loads. It's fine, it's just a couple of kilograms. It doesn't matter, Lucia smiled and kissed his cheek, whispering, stop worrying so much, it's only been a short while, and you're already on edge. All right, but promise me not to lift heavy things again. I promise, she smiled. I hope Celia likes the clothes I got for Fernando. He's growing so fast that I don't even know what size to buy as a gift. Will you tell her the news? Yes, of course. Even if I don't say anything, she'll figure it out on her own, but she'll be upset afterward. Your friend is quite funny, Benjamin remarked, opening the car door. Get in, my dear wife, and get warm. Settling into the chair, Lucia fastened her seatbelt and looked out of the window. Spring was approaching, its gentle breath felt in the air, and the winter that had recently ruled everywhere was about to give way to warmth. The past few months had been the happiest yet most nerve-wracking for Lucia. The long-awaited trial took place, and as a result, Federico received the deserved punishment, while Marisol, using her connections, managed to escape unnoticed and left the country. Choosing between her feelings for Federico and her freedom, she chose the latter and seemed to have no regrets about it. Celia gave birth to a dark-haired boy named Fernando, who resembled his lively and restless mother. Motherhood was not easy for her, but she tried to face everything with optimism. Lucia and Benjamin got married, and on their wedding day, Jasmine did show up at the marriage ceremony hall and congratulated her daughter on this important event. However, she refused to attend the reception, citing urgent matters. Lucia took her mother's behavior calmly. She had given up hope of building a close relationship with her and stopped playing the role of a dutiful daughter. A month later, Lucia discovered that she was pregnant and now had to share the news with Celia, the one person who had believed in her and supported her when she took in a nameless and forgotten stranger from the streets, a person without a past and in need of help, from whom everyone else turned away.
An amazing story, isn't it? Thank you for listening till the end. I sincerely hope that you truly enjoyed it. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and rate this video. See you in the comments and in new releases.